Hello, a very good morning to you. Just after 6 o'clock on Saturday, February the 1st. Yes, the 1st of February. Pinch and a punch for the 1st of the month and no returns. And very good news indeed, of course. Dry January is over. Not that I adhered to it, but many people did. It's Feasting February, of course. That begins today. Really good news for you this morning. It's St. Bridget's Day today. Well, who is she? She's one of Ireland's most beloved saints. And today celebrates her legacy as a symbol of generosity, of compassion and creativity. Now, in Irish folklore, she is portrayed as protector of the home, a healer and a spiritual guide. And today is a day of reflection, renewal and celebration of nature's cycles. Let me just tell you very quickly, to celebrate St. Bridget's Day, the Department of Foreign Affairs and the ITMA, the Irish Traditional Music Archive, have collaborated on a series of 3 short online films, and each film showcases a newly composed piece of music inspired by lore related to Bridget. Take it away. So there you go, St. Bridget's Day today. Also, this might be closer to home for many of you. It's Dark Chocolate Day today. Yummy! A day that encourages you to savour the bittersweet chocolate and appreciate its many health benefits. Let me tell you, it is high in antioxidants, in fibre and minerals. It's also lower in sugar than other chocolate. Yum, yum, yum!
And all because David Bull loves dark chocolate.
I think they may have ripped that off an advert, just thinking. Also, happy birthday to Stephanie of Monaco. Now, she is the sister of Albert II and daughter of Rainier III and Grace Kelly. She turns 80 today. A very happy birthday to you.
Happy birthday,
Right, let's move on to today's fascinating facts.
Today's fascinating facts.
So, some crackers for you this hour. 4 minutes past 6 on this day in 1327. 14-year-old Edward III. 14? Edward III. He was crowned King of England, but the country was ruled by his mother, Queen Isabella, and her lover, Roger Mortimer. On this day in 1709, Scotsman Alexander Selkirk was rescued from an uninhabited desert island. Why is that important? Well, it was Masa Tierra, which is off the coast of Chile. The reason this is important, it inspired the book Robinson Crusoe by Daniel Defoe. Now, Defoe actually lived in Gateshead for 4 years, although it's believed he lived at Hillgate around 1710 with a bookseller named Joseph Button. And on this day in 1930, the first ever Times crossword puzzle was published. And those are today's fascinating facts.
Wake up, it's Saturday, the sun's shining bright. David and Lewis, they're bringing the light. The best story's waiting, it's time to unwind. With coffee and laughter, let's see what we find.
Well, a very good morning to you. Do you love the jingle? 5 minutes past 6 there. As you heard, I'm joined by Lewis Oakley, broadcaster this morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
Do you
I
like
made
that?
a jingle.
You've
Look
got
at
your own
that.
jingle. Yeah, how about that?
Career done there. Who's creating these that quickly?
Dave.
There
very
we
clever.
go. Good
very
old
clever
Dave.
in there. Dark chocolate. This is the big talking point of the day. Dark chocolate, are you a fan?
Well, look, I've brought you some because it's National Dark Chocolate Day. There you
thank
go.
you. That's very sweet. of you.
Health benefits. We're going to live forever now.
Someone told you, obviously. A little birdie told you I was
So
going to be
someone
talking
told
about
me
it.
David loves dark chocolate. He's going to be covering it on the show, and I thought, right,
That's
well, I'll go
very
get
sweet.
some. But I've got to be honest, I had to go to 3 shops to
Yeah.
find any dark chocolate. I had no idea. Maybe this might be the last dark chocolate day because that was the only box I could find.
It's interesting. I mean, it is available. Certainly when I lived in America, dark chocolate was far more freely available. And dark chocolate is much better. Of course, it doesn't have the milk in it. It doesn't have the amount of sugar that you have in milk chocolate. It's also high in antioxidants, which obviously are cancer-fighting chemicals. Also, I didn't realise this, dark chocolate has 11 grams of fibre. It's also got iron, magnesium, copper, manganese. And also, in addition to all of this, potassium, phosphorus, zinc and selenium. Now, selenium is a very important trace element, and it's believed that that improves your cognition. So if you want to stay on top of your game...
So I should have eaten some before coming on air.
You should have done, yeah. So very interesting, actually, dark chocolate. I think we should try some of those later on.
Absolutely. That's why I brought it.
Very good. There's a lot of news this morning. Let's start here, shall we? The front page of the Times. Here is the headline, and I think this will resonate with many of you around the country. Just before we came on air, Lewis and I were talking about just the dire economic situation of this country, and I think many people are thinking, what is the point of working when you are taxed to the hill? You don't get any public services. The whole thing's falling apart. And this front page this morning, long-term sick facing crackdown on benefits. The long-term sick will be required to look for work, not before time, in my humble opinion. Many will see their benefits cut under a radical overhaul of welfare being drawn up by ministers. As you read further into the copy, it says hundreds of thousands of people could see reductions in sickness benefits payments under reforms designed to encourage them back to work. This is because we have a ballooning welfare bill. It is off the charts.
So, yes, I am definitely at the point where I think, what is the point of working? However, with things like long-term sick, you've got to think of the winter fuel allowance, where people saying people are going to freeze to death. What we don't want as a country is one where, disabled people and people that are genuinely sick are going to starve to death. So we have to be careful with this. I think sometimes, I think there's this perception from some Brits that, well, everyone that's on sort of sickness benefit is, making it up or exaggerating it. And that is not the case. There are some people that genuinely, in our country, cannot work. And as 100%. A civilised country, we should be looking after them. I don't mind them having a little look at it and saying, well, actually, you could work, or and I think that the two things that have happened here, one is the mental health aspect. I think people have less sympathy for a mental illness than a physical one. If someone physically cannot walk somewhere, I think people are more happy to say, yeah, they're disabled, they're long-term sick. Whereas if someone, is struggling with something mentally, people have a little bit less sympathy. And I think the other issue that's sort of been raised by this is people that are coming to the country, so immigrants that are coming to the country, that are then automatically sick, and where the line is with that.
I mean, when you look at our welfare budget, and we'll come on to the reasons that people claim it and the difficulties of getting off it, one of the other problems, I think, is sometimes it is much easier to stay on your benefits. The minute you start looking for a job, you are then penalised, and so people don't want to find those jobs because they lose their benefits, and you're in this terrible catch-22, and I completely get that.
Yes.
I think there's another issue to this, is the government is at fault. It locked us down. I think the consequences of what we did, or what they did over COVID, are far-reaching, and actually the implications for mental health, particularly of younger people. You were told to cover your face. We use our faces to communicate.
Yeah, I mean, this is totally a lot of this is self-inflicted, as you say, from those COVID days. I mean, it still pains me to this day what we did, and this is, the consequence. And a lot of people, once they saw, actually, you don't have to go to work every day. Why would you want to? So, we're still dealing with this COVID.
But of course, going to work every day is also beneficial for your mental health. And I have friends, I have many people I know who are at home. They're socially isolated, and the more you're socially isolated, the less sort of emphasis there is on going out, but also you lose your confidence. So it is a self-perpetuating cycle.
Well, I agree, but I do say it probably depends on what the job is.
It does. Let's just look at the numbers, though. We spend £65 billion on sickness benefits, right? 65 billion.
I know.
Let's look at everything in relation to that 65 billion. 60 billion to defence. So we're spending more on benefits than on defence. That cannot be right in your civilised country. We are also only spending 20 billion on the police, and you see that we've got a crime epidemic spiralling out of control, where people are going in, ram-raiding shops, nicking whatever they want because we don't have enough police on the street, and we have a finite amount of money. And so therefore I do believe the government is right to tackle it. I think to tackle tackle the disability benefit problem is going to be very complicated. It's going to take a long period of time to actually enact it. And I'm not sure it's going to give... It may bring them brownie points, but certainly not for those who are truly in need of disability benefits.
Well, this is the thing, and I think it's just the context of this, of doing this now as well, after we've everything that's happened with the Chancellor and with the economic situation, to then sort of be like, well, we're going to turn to the sick, leaves a bit of a bad taste. And it also...
Well, that's quite interesting, actually. First of all, the elderly and then the sick. That's quite interesting.
And I think that, to me, is what turns me off from this. And it almost is like you're doing this for politics rather than saying, look, this is just unreasonable. We need more of a common sense approach. We're going to have a little look at it. We're going to make it easier for people to get back to work. We're not going to turn off the taps immediately if you're, getting yourself back into work, and that's fine. That's what we want to encourage. And probably the reality being that if you want to get more people in, you're probably going to have to invest more money to actually help get them back into work, whether that is in mental health, resources, or whatever it is. It's not going to be as simple as you're just going to cut money.
I think it has become far too easy to claim benefits without any oversight from any third power. So what they are going to, or what is expected to be sort of unveiled, tougher conditions for those signed off sick. Most of these have no obligation to prepare for or seek work. 2.4 million incapacity benefit claimants have no work conditions. That's up 50% in 5 years. Now, surely there has to be a contract between the state and the person to say, of course, we will look after you, we'll give you disability benefits, but in return, you have to start looking for a job. We have to try and find you a position to place you in so that you can integrate back into society. I'm deeply worried that what we do is silo people. We stick them at home and we leave them.
Yeah, of course. Well, we should be encouraging people. Did you just say that was 5 years ago? And what happened 5 years ago to make it jump 50%?
And that's why I said I feel very passionate about COVID. And the fact is that what we've done is created a generation of people, many generations of people with mental health problems.
And no apologies. And, this is from a government that when they were in opposition was saying lockdown longer, harder, shut more things down.
And actually, it's interesting. I'm listening to Boris Johnson and his book Unleashed at the moment, and he... Well, it's fascinating because, of course, his instincts were not to lock down. But he was then given all this evidence by the so-called experts saying that we need to lock down harder and faster. And actually, it was detrimental not only to the economy, and look what it did to our economy, but then we had to pay people and furlough people because all the SMEs were going off a cliff and the bigger companies were going off a cliff. And we are still dealing with the consequences of all of this.
Yeah,
and it was predicated on false data.
No, I know. I have a complicated opinion of Boris Johnson because the buck stops with him. He was the Prime Minister. This whole, I didn't know what I was doing. They were just throwing charts at me and I didn't know.
But to be fair to the Prime Minister, you take on board all the evidence that is presented to you and you make your best educated decision based upon the evidence that's given to you. Now, if that evidence is false, which it has turned out to be...
And people saying, don't show the big man this. We've got those WhatsApps now. They were hiding things from him.
So therefore, it is very complicated. It also, for Boris Johnson, became even more complicated when he became ill, because that will then sort of temper and tailor your view, won't it, if you yourself are caught up in it?
This is why it's complicated for me with Boris Johnson, because I think you were the leader, the buck stops with you. You can't pass the blame.
Of course.
But at the same time, I do think it was probably... The idea of a lockdown was so against his personality and everything. That was the thing. He couldn't stick to lockdowns himself. So that's probably, got us out of lockdown a bit quicker than I think we would have gone for.
We'll talk more about the detail in just a bit, but they're looking at the Universal Credit Limited capability for work-related activity category being abolished. They want to look at various things like the PIP payments to be overhauled. It is worth just saying, when you look at our economically inactive population, 770,000 under 25, not in education, employment or training. I mean, that's just disgraceful. And 9.25 million economically inactive between 16 and 64. So that is the root cause of much of this. But also, you've then got Rachel Reeves already in trouble over her budget, paying off the unions, now needs more money. Then there's going to be a spring budget. There's going to be a revolt.
I think so, and just going back to those statistics on the young, but I do feel like with the young, it's like what is the point of working for them? And I mean this honestly. If they're saying, well, I want to get my first job, and it's like, oh, well, I'm going to pay half of that back in tax, and then I'm not going to be able to afford to rent anywhere anyway, so I'm just stuck at my parents' house anyway. So this thing of you're not going to be able to buy, you're really going to struggle to be able to rent, and then the kind of thing of you're just living to work and you have no fun. I'm sorry, that's not really appealing. So, and I think that needs to be, there needs to be reward for working.
Let me just move on to, this isn't well, it is front page of the Daily Telegraph, but it's on the side of the front page of the Telegraph. I think this is a massive story. Here is the headline: Starmer fudging the facts over his schooling. So I have spent a lot of time on this programme talking about the imposition of VAT on private schools. I think it's abhorrent, I think it smacks of ideology, and also the government doesn't seem to understand that there are a lot of people who go to private school, the parents work 2 jobs, they have put their children over and above everything that they can. Now, the government says it's going to bring in £1.5 billion, but actually the saving to the state is £4.5 billion by keeping those people out of the state education. Of course, don't forget they're already paying for that. But today, there has been an amazing discovery. This is Sir Peter Lample. Now, he is very well regarded in Labour circles. He's a former advisor to Sir Tony Blair. He's founder of the Sutton Trust. He's attacked the VAT raid on private schools. And he says Sir Keir Starmer is fudging the facts about his education. Now, why would he know that? The reason is he went to the same school as Starmer. And Starmer keeps saying it was a state school, but it wasn't a state school at all. It was essentially, it was basically a state, he says it was a state school. The school was funded by the council when Sir Keir Starmer joined, but 2 years later, when he was still there, it became independent. So it was then a private school. And guess what? The local council paid the fees for Keir Starmer. They agreed to cover fees for pupils who had enrolled before the conversion. He then got a bursary to continue his studies in the 6th form. As an independent school, it is £9,000 a term for pupils. So he is lying.
Well, you're going to get to the bottom of it, clearly. Look, hypocrisy and politicians go hand in hand. So, I mean,
but they shouldn't.
Not surprised. But I think, sort of going back to that issue at hand, I do think this VAT rate, I really think, my personal opinion is that Labour know that they've messed up with this, but they're so new in, I think that they just can't bear the thought of a U-turn. I think they just can't bear it, and they think that they've got to stay strong, and that if they start giving up on key policies now, they'll look ridiculous. And I think this is the thing, I don't think that there is appetite for this.
No. Do you think they do realise they've messed up? When you actually look back at things that Rachel Reeves has said, for example, in the past, she says, and I'm paraphrasing, I'm going to smash the private schools. This is ideology over and above children's education. The bit that I feel is unforgivable, even if you believe in the policy, which I don't, is to bring it in halfway through the school year, where children have to leave.
Yeah, and that's what people, I think, don't talk about enough in this story, is imagine being at school and having to leave, of having to move schools, of having to leave your friends. I know, and you can't think of anything worse than having to move them in the school year, and then probably a bit of stigma from some parents and kids of being like, oh, your mummy and daddy are poor, or whatever it is, and that as well. And I think that the children in this is what should not be forgotten in the story.
It's interesting. Sir Peter Lample says, I don't pretend the school we went to was a state school. Starmer does. He's fudging the facts. This is pretty sort of destructive for Starmer, because you've got this man who is obviously held up in high regard in terms of education, saying Keir Starmer is basically telling lies about our education. He was described by Blair as his favourite millionaire. I'm just looking back at the private schools, just the number of private schools that have closed over the last few months. Labour also underestimating the impact, with 3,000 kids applying to join state schools between June and September of last year. Another 2,500 kids given notice to leave this month or last month.
Yeah, it's wrong. But I mean, this is the thing. What can anyone do about it? I mean, Starmer's approval ratings are beyond in the toilet at this point. They're halfway in the sewers. people didn't Labour got in because of this split between Reform and Tories. It wasn't that they were massively popular. I think they got less votes than Jeremy Corbyn did previously. So they were never wildly popular to begin with. They're doing such big things that people don't agree with. The approval ratings are in the toilet. What can you even say about it?
Well, it's interesting. Tess in Leicester, good morning to you. Tess says, David, we're paying millions daily for migrants. Absolutely. And that links nicely, actually, back to the long-term sick. And I said that we're spending 65 billion on sickness payments. We've only got 60 billion for defence. We are spending 20 billion on the police. And we're spending 6 billion on the asylum system. Meanwhile, of course, Keir Starmer believes that the great panacea is to levy VAT on private schools. Now, of course, the other thing that he hasn't taken into account is the number of bursaries. So if the private schools don't have the income they had, they can't give the scholarships and the bursaries to kids who are less well off, and they haven't thought that through.
No, this whole policy is awful.
It is awful.
I agree, there's nothing to say.
So let me just ask you a question then. Labour is in a shocking state. I mean, his poll ratings are awful, -34, I think. Just to see the dramatic change in Starmer's popularity ratings. And Labour is desperate to go on the offensive. Last night, Reform, and we'll talk about this later, last night Reform took the fight to Kemi Badenoch's constituency and held an event in her constituency. Labour is very much on the offensive, saying we're going to target the nasty far right. And yet, and I'll show you these polls as well, every single poll last week put Reform in an amazing position over and above Labour, bar one, I think. But just in terms of that, Labour obviously has to regroup, decide the best strategy to attack not only the Conservatives, but Reform and other political parties as well. Who do you think is the problem here? Is it Labour or is it Keir Starmer that's the problem? Or both?
Oh, that's such a good question. I think it's probably... I think it is probably both. I think Keir Starmer, as a leader, has just made so many mistakes that just is not in keeping with where the mood of the country is. And to have called so many things... far right. Yeah, I'm looking at the
So look, I'm just showing you this. Find out now. This is one of those polls. Reform. If a general election was called tomorrow, how would you vote? Top of that, I mean, this is unprecedented. Reform UK at 27, Labour at 23, Conservatives at 21. You're right. Keir Starmer is not judging the mood of the country.
I think this is the thing, and the way you describe certain things of, too many things being deemed far right, which actually I think we have to have a coming together now, because the pendulum has swung so far around of saying, look, it's not far right to demand that borders are enforced, and we can have a little talk about where the line should be and what the number should be, but we absolutely need to have that. That's not a far right position, or being outraged about certain things. And I think that that's the thing, is it's this sort of elitism that lives in London that tries to then prey on people being good people and bad people, and people just are not feeling it. The majority of people, I think, in this country are thinking we are seeing a massive decline in living standards.
Yeah.
We're seeing a massive decline in, the police being able to, stop crime and all these kind of things. People are not liking the general direction of the country. And so when you're tinkering around the edges with, we're going to change this VAT, and not thinking through how that might impact just ordinary working people, or just, hard working middle-class people. I think that's where you need to be. And that's why you're seeing such a different state of affairs with Trump coming in the US, which is like, actually, and there's a lot of problems with what he's doing, but actually the sort of everyday person is sort of saying, well, at least this is being done. I might not agree with him on this, but at least that's happening.
I mean, I think you're absolutely right. This notion of far right is a lazy trope. It is being wheeled out by journalists. They just write far right. I'd like to know what far right actually looks like. We'll talk about that in a minute. And you're right, front page of the Daily Telegraph this morning. Also, Trump kicks off trade war with China. We'll talk about that after the break. Let me just ask you that question. Thank you for the moment, Lewis. Let me ask you that question, though. The Labour Party is in serious trouble. So the question this morning is, why? Is the problem the Labour Party, the lack of concerted, joined-up thinking and policies, or is it the leader? Is Keir Starmer the problem? Should they ditch him? Is it the Labour Party? Is it Starmer? Or is it both? Let me know your thoughts, please. 0344 499 1000. Those calls charged at the national rate. You can also text the word talk in your message to 87222. You can message us on X as well at talkTV. After the break, we're going to be talking about Trump. We'll also be talking about the fact that AstraZeneca is pulling out of the UK, and that's because of Keir Starmer. What a surprise. This is Talk.
is a court order, isn't it, that's been issued because of the coverage that you have done in Ukraine. And knowing you as I do, I imagine you probably won't affect you at all. You'll just continue to do what you've always done.
You cannot see this move by the Russian court as anything but an attempt to intimidate journalists like me who report on the conflict. And as a matter of principle, I will not be cowed, and I will go back to Ukraine, certainly, and I will continue to report on this war.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, Weekend Breakfast, 6:29 now. I'm David Ball, joined by Lewis Oakley this morning. I'm asking, Labour has a serious problem when you look at all of the opinion polls from last week. So the question I have for you this morning: what is the problem? Is it Labour, the lack of policies, the fact that none of them seem to make any sense? Is it the fact that people feel less well off? They feel that they're being hammered by taxes? Or is it, as Lewis said, the leader who seems to be unable to judge the mood of the country? Many of you getting in touch this morning. Good morning, Dave, says John Pickard. Good morning to you. I believe it to be both. We can all see Labour is now woke. Good morning, David. This is Natasha. Socialist governments never have the interests of the country and its people at heart. It's always ideology, which we talked about with the VAT on private schools. So Starmer and the Labour Party are both the problem. Oh, this is working nicely, this question. I actually do agree with that, but you have to be led by the captain, by the leader of that team. And I think Starmer is such a technocrat that he doesn't... Politics is about not just having views on particular subjects or having policies. It's also about being in touch with real people.
It's about being in touch with real people. Also, the argument that he won so big and they got so many seats.
Yes.
Actually, it's sort of impossible to sort of keep that many MPs happy anyway. Because I know that there are people that think that he's too centrist, he's not left enough, and then other people that think he's too left. So, actually, you know, anyone in that position would have a tough job, in fairness.
I mean, it's quite interesting, actually. This is Tony Gannon. Good morning to you. He says only 20% of the voting age population actually voted for two-tier Keir. There, David, is the fundamental problem. This one, I will read it dispassionately. David, this is Christina. Good morning to you. Starmer and Labour are bad for the country. Reform UK all the way. Those polls will make very sobering reading, I think. Let's move on and talk about Trump. There is no doubt, and I'm going to be talking to Caroline Faraday later at 8 o'clock this morning about the latest news in the US. Look, Donald Trump, whether you like him or loathe him, puts the United States first. The copy has moved on. This is the front page of the Daily Telegraph. Donald Trump has introduced tariffs on China, on Mexico and Canada, prompting fears of a global trade war and inflation crisis. So look, he's putting America first. He's imposed 25% tariffs on Canada and also on Mexico, the two neighbours. Quite surprised, only 10% on Chinese goods.
Yeah, well, but this is this is what he said he was going to do. He's going to put America first. He told them that these tariffs were coming. Not really that many people shocked. And I think it's strange this time with Trump, not as much outrage about everything he's doing, of people kind of... And I think maybe that's because the win was so big. He won, you know, the popular vote, the House, the Senate, everything. And so I think this time it's kind of like, well, he really has a mandate to be doing these things. And even in some of these countries that are being hit, they were expecting it. I mean, the big one is going to be what happens with Europe.
Yes, and I'm glad you mentioned that. Interestingly, let's just stay with Canada for the moment. Mark Carney, who was obviously head of the Bank of England, he is one of the frontrunners to be, or the frontrunner to be the next Canadian Prime Minister. He says that Canada will stand up to the bully after Trump's saying he's going to impose tariffs on Canada. He is the leader of Canada's governing Liberal Party, obviously the former governor of the Bank of Canada and the Bank of England. But you mentioned the EU, and this is where I said the copy has changed, because the printed version of the Telegraph has a very different headline to the online version of the Telegraph. And this is because Donald Trump, and this story has moved on overnight, he says he is going to impose tariffs on the European Union. He goes further. He says, am I going to impose tariffs on the European Union? You want the truthful answer, or shall I give you a political answer? Absolutely. The European Union has treated us terribly.
Well,
there will be quaking boots in Europe.
I know, and I mean, Europe is not doing well anyway now. I mean, you know, you've got kind of Germany in and out of recession. The economics of Europe and the European Union is not good. Hopefully, we'll see what happens with the UK now that we're not part of the bloc anymore.
Well, so that's the most important point about this. The US is actually the UK's largest individual trading partner. Most of our trade is in services. They wouldn't be affected by any tariffs. But we now have to make a decision. We spoke about this on the programme, I think, last week. We have to decide, or the head boy, Keir Starmer, needs to decide, who are you most closely aligned with? Is it going to be the European Union with a declining balance of trade, or is it going to be the rest of the world, including the United States, which is our closest ally?
I can tell you, it's Europe. He wants the closer ties of Europe.
I know.
So that question is solved. That's the way we're going to go. No, I know. I mean, this is the thing. You've got Trump, who, you know, love him or loathe him. He has got a special place in his heart for the UK. This would be prime time for. And not that I'm saying I would want Boris back, but if we had a Prime Minister like Boris that could, you know, build that enthusiasm and broker some deals with Trump, it probably would be good for our trade. But that's just not going to happen. Keir Starmer is tied with Europe. That's where he wants to. I mean, Keir Starmer wasn't even the first person Trump called, and that usually is sort of that tradition of the American president calls the UK Prime Minister. There's no talk of anyone going over there or anyone coming over here. That special relationship is not there.
No, not at all. I mean, it's interesting. Yesterday, 5 years ago, was Brexit. Yes. And obviously I was there, and we'll talk about Brexit later. Sir Gerald Howarth will be joining me later on this morning, that's around 9 o'clock, to talk about Brexit. We haven't seized the opportunities. You know, I see this from people like Alistair Campbell saying actually the vast majority of people want to go back into the European Union. No, they don't. What they want is to see a proper Brexit, which we have not achieved. And I think this is the whole point, is that we had Theresa May. She never believed in Brexit at the time, so we got this ridiculous deal. Listening to Boris Johnson on Unleashed, he says, I've got an oven-ready deal. No, you didn't. The whole thing was a total fudge. We've annexed Northern Ireland. We haven't sorted out trade. There are huge barriers. We haven't actually capitalised on what we could be doing. Interestingly, and just going back to the VAT on private schools, that could only have happened because of Brexit. So, in fact, Labour is using Brexit when it suits them, but not actually using it to its full advantage.
Yeah, there's all this talk of get Brexit done, and we heard that constantly, Brexit done. And I almost think with something like Brexit isn't something you get done. I think Brexit is more a state of mind about seizing opportunity, about saying, actually, we can change this now, actually, we can change that. We can have this bonfire of legislation that I don't think really ever happened.
Well, it didn't. And, of course, we've got retained EU legislation. All they did was basically take all the EU laws and shove them on the British statute book.
Yeah, and so this is what I mean. There was all the, and I think it's how politics works. They want to say, well, you know, it's the date. We set the date and we sign this piece of paper. It's not about getting anything done. It was about that state of mind. And you're right. I have heard a lot of people, because it's the 5-year anniversary, talking about Brexit this week, talking about, you know, what a big mistake it was and blah, blah, blah.
Do you think it was?
Well, it depends on who you ask, right? Because, well, here's the thing. This is what I would say. A lot of people that talk about Brexit being a bad thing now, 5 years on, obviously talk about the economic argument. But what I felt at the time when people were talking about this in 2016, no one was talking about principles. And if you ask a lot of people that say that they voted for Brexit, they didn't vote for Brexit because they thought they knew what the economic situation would be like in 2025.
No.
They voted on principles. Well, actually, I don't want MEPs over there making decisions that affect us here. And so I think that if you were to ask those people, they would say, well, it was about the principle. I got what I wanted in that sense. And also just in the way that our politics has gone maybe in the last year. You know, look at the kicking the Tories got in the last election. If we'd have been in the EU, they would have been saying we wanted to run the country competently, but the EU wouldn't let us. Like, we wanted to fix immigration, but the EU wouldn't let us. Well, actually, the election we just had was the first time there was nowhere to hide, there was nowhere to run. The Tories had to stand on their own record and get judged on that. And even now with this Labour Party, it's like they can't say, oh, it's the EU's fault. They have to take responsibility for their own actions. And so people that voted for Brexit for that, you know, that they're getting what they wanted.
I mean, I always said that this would be a process, that you start on that date that we left and then there's a process of transition. Of course, because we become so subsumed by the European Union that extraction is always going to be difficult. That being said, when you look at Liz Truss's mini budget, that budget was predicated on the fact that we were a free and independent sovereign country. Much of that budget was right. What she did badly was she didn't brief the markets, and that's where it all fell apart. But the fact is that going forward, we should seize this. We need to make it work. We need to make ourselves competitive to the rest of the world. We'll talk more about that, by the way, at 9 o'clock with Sir Gerald Howarth, who I know will have a lot to say on that matter. Let me know, please, also your thoughts on that. Has Brexit worked? Are we in the middle of Brexit, or is it a process? Let me know your thoughts on that. 0344 499 1000. After the break, I'm going to be talking about AstraZeneca ditching a plan where they were about to build a £450 million factory in the UK, but Keir Starmer seems to have stuffed that up. We'll talk about that after this break. This is Weekend Breakfast. Good morning.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
6:42, I'm asking this morning, right, what's the problem? Labour is in serious trouble here. Is it the Labour Party and the lack of policies and Ed Miliband and all the rest of them? Or is it Starmer? Is he the problem? If they remove Starmer, would they actually see a resurgence in the polls? Let me know your thoughts. 0344 499 1000, calls charged at the national rate. Lots of you getting in touch. Nicola from sunny Norfolk, good morning to you. Good morning, David. It is both Starmer and the Labour Party that are the problem. Their policies are more akin to sixth form student politics, totally ideologically driven, with zero interest in working in the best interests of anyone other than those who buy into their sheer madness. The entire cabinet are clueless and, quite frankly, dangerous. I remember Starmer saying in the election that his party was ready for government. Yeah, well remembered, with fully costed plans. That's a peach, with fully costed plans for every department. That has now been shown to be a lie. Oh, the second time we've used the word lie this morning. Their plan was actually to ask quangos and regulators for ideas. I mean, that is extraordinary on what to do. I have never been so concerned about our country. Nicola, well said. Very erudite indeed. Sue, good morning to you. It is obvious that Starmer and the Labour cabinet are mostly to blame for what's happening to our country. The whole Labour Party just follow, knowing they are incompetent. That's all. They are all to blame. It's interesting, this, because you're seeing signs of fracturing within the Labour Party. You've got all those youthful MPs who've been elected for the first time who are too frightened to speak out, but equally saying, where are we going? I mean, we are driving off a cliff here. So they got into Parliament thinking, oh, you know, look, I've got a pension and 20 years in the House. At this rate, they'll be lucky to make it to next year.
No, it's interesting. I don't think many people have bets on them going the full 5 years, and it's certainly not on Keir Starmer lasting the full 5 years. We'll see what happens. I do think, though, you know, even if you get rid of Keir Starmer, and I think, you know, the mud is starting to stick to him now. You've had the whole two-tier thing, you had the whole Stockport thing.
The lying in the Telegraph.
The lying in the Telegraph about his schooling, which has really got you mad this morning.
It has.
So there's so many things that are starting to stick to him now. But it's not as easy. So the Tories, whenever they sort of sense blood in the water, would sort of get rid of their leader. I don't think it's as easy in the Labour Party there's not really a path to get rid of him, as I understand it, as much. It'd sort of be that he would have to sort of go willingly rather than they could get rid of him.
Probably the knives are out from the unions, I don't know. I mean, as you said, of course, he's being pulled in two directions. One is to become more centrist, the other is to become more left-wing. Let's talk about another own goal by the Labour government. If you are just waking up this morning, this is actually front page of the FT. I can't say it's a paper I read cover to cover. AstraZeneca ditches a vaccine plant. Now, before you get all carried away in talking about vaccines, it's not really about that. AstraZeneca has cancelled plans for a £450 million vaccine manufacturing plant. The reason? Because the British government has intervened. So there was basically this deal that was done by Jeremy Hunt in the last administration, which was pretty much done and dusted. He said, Jeremy Hunt says, I intervened personally to get the deal over the line. This is in 2023. And the government essentially has cut the subsidies to this plant and says, well, you can't actually have the 90 million we promised, which actually, in the scale of things, is a very small investment. And they then wanted to do a deal on 40 million. Now, the plant was actually going to make flu vaccines. It's really important that as we grow as an economy, we need to move to high-tech industry. We have brilliant scientists in this country. It is a British-Swedish company. So we need to invest in British companies. Anyway, so they were going to make the new generation of flu vaccines, and the idea that the UK would be a leader in vaccine technology. And Rachel Reeves, of course, has been positioning the United Kingdom as a place to do business, particularly for tech companies, and this is yet another own goal.
I know, it's not a good look, especially since the deal was sort of already on the table. It's them kind of intervening and saying, well, we're not going to give you that much money. And the company just turning around and saying, well, look, why would we put in all this money when we can go somewhere else?
When we can spend it on illegal migrants.
Well, yeah. But I think the problem here, and it's this thing that Rachel Reeves is having, she always seems to keep having egg on her face. There was the picture, I think it was this week or last week, where she had summoned all these business leaders and they were talking about confidence in Britain. The next day, one of the people sat there, said they were closing loads of high street banks. And so it's this kind of like they're trying to PR it, but this just steady decline of companies saying, no, we don't want to come here because you've been unhelpful. No, we don't want to keep our bank branches open because of X and Y. And I think that this is the thing. It's like, where can they go? They, you know, to give them a break, they can't catch a break, can they? It's just not going well.
And, of course, they're very worried about the fiscal headroom, whether there has to be another spring budget where there'll be more tax rises. What about if Starmer, if he was a leader, he sacks Reeves, he says, right, we're going to have a new budget, I've got a new chancellor in, it's high risk, but it might just pay off.
It completely depends on what that new chancellor wants to unlock and do. There's no point changing just to say we want to get rid of the bad. And I think this is the problem that a lot of people have with this government, but also with the Tories, is no vision. no vision to get excited about, no understanding of this is what the British people are dealing with day to day. These are the big things. This is the exciting plan I've got. People are bought in, and to execute it.
Yeah. And actually, the vision, that is the whole point of this. I do not know what the end goal is of this government. What are they trying to achieve? What is the great vision? What is the grand plan? And then you've got, they're fighting like ferrets in a sack, aren't they? So you've got Rachel Reeves over here saying, oh, the economy is going to trump net zero. Ed Miliband, who's busy making windmills everywhere. So these two things do not work together.
No, if I were advising them, I'd say you need to go all in on housing. You need to go all in on housing. Yes, because right now we're in a situation where people, as we were talking about before, work is not paying. So the majority of people in this country, I think, are either spending about half to 60% of their monthly pay on where they live, whether that is rent or mortgage. If there were more houses available, if we could bring that down to actually people, on average in the UK, spend about 30% on where they live, then you've got all this free money that Brits have to start investing in other things to make the country appealing itself, where people say, you know what, I've saved a load of money over here, I'm going to invest it, I'm going to start a business. That's the problem, is we're all so broke and on the breadline at the moment. We don't have any money to spend on anything.
And you're right about aspiration for young people. Why should they work if they can't actually see the future, where they can't buy a house, where they can't, you know, do all the things that we've managed to do? I think it's despicable, actually. Thank you, Lewis, for the moment. Let me just bring you some breaking news. The release of 3 Israeli hostages is currently taking place in Khan Yunis. This is in southern Gaza. It's actually the 4th release of hostages since the ceasefire deal between Israel and Hamas began on the 19th of January. Now, later on, Israel will release more than 180 Palestinians who've been held in Israeli prisons. We'll bring you more on that as and when we get it. We'll take a break. After the break, I'm going to take you through, skip you through this morning's front pages. This is Weekend Breakfast. Good morning.
Why does this matter? Because elections are years away. You know, many things can change between now and then. Maybe reform will crash and burn. I hope not. But this looks and feels like a revolution in our politics. It looks and feels like finally there is an end in sight to the two-party system. We can't say whether it will or it won't happen, but from where I'm sitting, something very exciting is underway.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. This is Talk 6:53 on Saturday, February the 1st. I'm joined by Lewis Oakley this morning. We're chewing the cud over all of the top stories that are making the headlines. On that note, shall we take you through the front pages this morning? Let's start with some of the topics that we've talked about. This is the front page of The Times, our sister publication. This is long-term sick facing crackdown on benefits. It's a really complicated story, but essentially the long-term sick will be required to look for work, and many will see their benefits cut as part of an overhaul of welfare being drawn up by ministers. They say that hundreds of thousands of people could have their sickness benefit payments reduced under reforms designed to encourage them back to work. Liz Kendall, the Work and Pension Secretary, is preparing changes to prevent the long-term sick receiving benefits with no requirements, and they are likely to address the financial incentives. So they've talked a great deal about this budget deficit. Of course, there are real concerns about the Labour Party overspending, and of course Rachel Reeves may have to have a spring budget. But when you look at the costs, and they are astronomical, and we were talking about many people are trapped because they're on benefits, but they don't want to get a job because they'll then be worse off, and that needs to change. We spend 65 billion quid on sickness benefits, 65 billion over here, right? And then you've got defence, 60 billion. And yet we're living in a very uncertain world. We're only spending 20 billion on the police. And it's worth saying, of course, the huge sums of money we're spending on illegal migration. That is the front page of The Times this morning. Then we move on to the Daily Telegraph. Their lead story is Trump kicks off a trade war with China, putting 10% on China, 25% on Mexico and Canada. Trump also rather inflammatory comments saying, I'm going to attack the EU next. And of course the UK is sitting there thinking, well, hopefully that doesn't apply to us. But this is a huge story for me. On the right, Starmer fudging the facts over his schooling. Sir Keir Starmer has been accused by Britain's most eminent social mobility expert of fudging the facts over his education. Now, Keir Starmer keeps saying, I went to a state school. Now, this is Sir Peter Lample, who's a former advisor to Sir Tony Blair. He's founder of the Sutton Trust, a big donor to Labour as well. He essentially says he went to school, which was Reigate Grammar, the same school as Keir Starmer. He says Starmer is pretending it was a state school, but it wasn't. It was funded by the council when Keir joined, and 2 years later it became a private school. So it wasn't a state school. The local authority agreed to cover fees for pupils who'd already enrolled before the conversion, and Keir Starmer, wait for this is the punchline, got a bursary. Exactly the same things he will remove by adding VAT to private education. And that school now charges £9,150 a term for pupils. Sir Peter goes further. I don't pretend the school we went to was a state school. Starmer does. He is fudging the facts. It's a peach of a story.
Really lit you on fire this morning, hasn't it?
Well, it's double standards.
I know, but I fear this kind of hypocrisy is just factored in now.
But
we've seen all of the
it's unacceptable.
Glasses and the suits.
You know,
and
I'm going to say it as it is. It's a lie. It's an abject lie.
Yeah. I know. I just think it's factored in now. I think that's just no one is shocked by it, and that's why I think it's good that you are. It's good that you've got some fight left in you. But I think most people just think, yeah, probably.
Well, of course there is also going to be a legal case from many of those private schools against the government, although it's not binding and they can't actually change the policy. But I do think, and you made the point, that Labour has basically underestimated the strength of feeling on this, and I think it's about fairness at the end of the day. Let's move on. Time is tight. Let's go to the FT weekend. This is the story I'm talking about. There was a deal done by Jeremy Hunt before they were removed from power, and the Labour Party has managed to kick that into the long grass, and essentially AstraZeneca, which was going to build this huge factory in the United Kingdom, has said, right, we're not going to do that, we're going to invest in other countries instead. The Daily Express, I will fight to honour the will of the people. This is on the anniversary of Brexit 5 years ago yesterday that we left. I was there in the celebration and the countdown to leaving the European Union. Kemi Badenoch, who? Kemi Badenoch has warned that Brexit is in danger under Labour. I would agree with that, and promised to honour the will of the British people. I'll be talking about Brexit with Sir Gerald Howarth at 9 o'clock this morning. What have we actually achieved in those 5 years? At the I weekend, most UK voters back under 30's migration deal in a Brexit reset with the EU, according to the I this morning. The Guardian has a very different front page. The Guardian's reporter is in Gaza. She packed her bag and headed back in search of her old life. The Daily Mail this morning. This is the story that won't go away for the royal family. Andrew told Epstein we'll play more soon. Prince Andrew faces fresh pressure after it emerged he promised Jeffrey Epstein they would play some more soon. This is after he said they cut contact. That's what he said in that Emily Maitler's interviewing. He said they stopped seeing each other in early December 2010. Well, according to this new evidence, that is not true. That is the front page of the Daily Mail there. Turn to page 4 for more allegations on this. It now has emerged through emails, even though he said they stopped seeing each other in December 2010. He emails him, this just gets worse, in February 2011. He wrote to Epstein saying, keep in close touch, we will play more soon. Read into that what you will. Front page of the Daily Mirror. The Beeb had a Wyn warning. This is about Wyn Evans' behaviour on Strictly. And finally, the front page of the Daily Star. Gold member, Orange Man Baby in Gold member. Orange Man Baby, Donald Trump has sparked a new gold rush as American investors, spooked by his mental tariff plans, snaffle all of Britain's bullion. So what that is alluding to is the price of gold is going up. And this is putting the tariffs on Canada and Mexico and China. Lots more still to come. This is Weekend Breakfast. Don't you dare go anywhere.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, a very good morning to you just after 7 o'clock on Saturday, February the 1st. A pinch and a punch for the first of the month. Great news, of course. Dry January is over. That means it's feasting February and possibly time for a tipple. Just asking. Also, other great news this morning. It's St. Bridget's Day today. Well, she is one of Ireland's most beloved saints. Today celebrates her legacy as a symbol of generosity, of compassion and creativity. Now, in Irish folklore, just ask Tommy, who seems to know an awful lot about Irish folklore, she is portrayed as protector of the home, a healer and a spiritual guide. Now, for St. Bridget's Day itself, 3 short films were commissioned that showcase a new piece of music inspired by folklore relating to Bridget, and this is one of them. Tommy's in there dancing away to that piece of music. Also today, it's Dark Chocolate Day today, a day that encourages you to savour the bittersweet chocolate and appreciate its many health benefits. It's actually high in antioxidants, fibre and minerals. It's lower in sugar than other chocolate. Yum, yum.
Dark chocolate eyes, angel.
Wow. That's the Bacon Brothers, Kevin and his brother. Yeah, things I tell you on this show. Also, happy birthday to Stephanie of Monaco. She is obviously the sister of Albert II and daughter of Rainier III. And Grace Kelly, happy birthday to you.
Happy birthday to you.
Right, let's move on to today's fascinating facts.
Today's fascinating facts.
So some new ones for you this hour. On this day in 1587, under pressure from her council, Queen Elizabeth I of England signed the warrant authorising the execution of Mary, Queen of Scots. On this day in 1910, the first 80 labour exchanges opened in Britain to try and find jobs for the unemployed. And on this day, this is not a good piece of news, on this day in 1952, the first TV detector van was demonstrated. It allowed the BBC to track down users of unlicensed television sets in Britain. Yeah, on this day in 1952. And those were this hour's fascinating facts.
Rise and shine, it's time for the show. David and Lewis, let the good times flow.
Well, as you rather gathered, I'm joined by Lewis Oakley this morning. Broadcast, good morning.
I love that jingle.
Yeah,
I'm going to download that on my phone later.
And dance along to it as you're walking down the street. Dark Chocolate Day, of course, a very important day. And thank you very much. Earlier on, Lewis brought me some dark chocolates. I'm very excited about those. And I'll share them out
Sweet
later.
to have the good antioxidants
Well, I need the fibre.
live forever.
And selenium. I need anything to stave off my cognitive decline.
Oh.
So selenium would help with that.
All right.
Let's just take you through some of the papers this morning if you are just joining us. We talked about these earlier. This is the front page of the Times. It's a complicated story, but obviously the government is in serious trouble and they are trying desperately to work out where their money is. And I think it's just worth saying that despite taking off the winter fuel allowance and making things very difficult for farmers and private schools and adding VAT, they've managed to give their union buddies pay rises. And now they're going after the long-term sick. Now, I think in principle, this is the right thing to do. The question is, the devil is in the detail. Now, they are saying the long-term sick will be required to look for work, and many of them will see their benefits cut under a radical overhaul of welfare being drawn up by ministers. Hundreds of thousands of people could see reductions in sickness benefit payments under these reforms by Liz Kendall. When you look at the numbers, and I think it is just worth saying, we spend 60 billion on defence, and yet we spend 65 billion on benefits, and that cannot be right.
I think your way of looking at it, of contextualising it with this is how much we spend on defence and all the other things, is the right thing to do. Because I think it just puts it into context of... Because they talk in billions now. You just... money down the back of the sofa, or is it significant? I think, as we were saying before, I just think that this is about being compassionate in a civilised country, about providing support for people that are too disabled to work. And I just hope that whilst they do take a look at this, because it does need looking at, that they keep that same principle of This is about compassion. It's not about, you know, because you hear these stories, don't you, of someone that is genuinely disabled having all their funding cut, and that's not what we want to see. We don't want to see disabled people starving.
No, not at all.
At all. At that same time, there are common sense things they could do. We talked earlier about, you know, helping people back into work, not saying your benefits are going to be cut straight away, and probably the idea of, you know, undoing some of that COVID damage they did.
I mean, there is no doubt there are those that are truly deserving of benefits, and there are those that are swinging the lead. And I think one of the most shocking things about the copy here is there are going to be much tougher conditions on those signed off sick, most of whom have no obligation to prepare for or seek work. There has to be a contract with the government here saying, well, here are your benefits. We're going to encourage you to get back into work. We'll do everything we can. But you actually have to do something, which is to look for work.
Well, but it depends on the disability.
Of course.
If you literally cannot stand up, then fine.
But if you've got 2.4 million
work.
people on incapacity benefits, have no work conditions attached to that. But some of those disabilities, of course, may be transient.
Yeah.
So they need to be reassessed.
Of course. I think this is the thing. You probably should have those people that, look, with the condition they've got, they're never going to be able to work. That's fine. We've assessed them once done. And then with the other ones where it's like, well, this actually could change over time, then maybe you set up a time for regular assessments and that kind of thing.
OK, I want to move on and talk about this other story, which is the front page of the Daily Telegraph. My blood was boiling this morning. This is about Keir Starmer. Starmer fudging the facts over his schooling. This is Keir Starmer has been accused by the most eminent social mobility expert of fudging the facts about his education. We know that Keir Starmer keeps saying, I went to a state school. No, you didn't. It now transpires he went to the same school as Sir Peter Lample. That school is an independent school. Keir Starmer got a bursary. Oh, by the way, the very things that will go when you impose VAT on private school fees. So, again, let's just say he's been rather economical with the truth.
Yeah, and as I was saying before, this is what we've come to expect. But it's the double standard now, and it's just the fact that if you benefited from something in your life, the fact that you would take that away from other people, I think it comes back to your point. It's about ideology, I think.
I mean, without a doubt. I mean, they keep giving this mantra, we're going to, by adding VAT onto private schools, which parents can afford, actually they can't, we will then recoup 1.5 billion. Let's just look at how much it saves the state by kids being in private schools, 4.5 billion. So do the maths here.
And I think that this is the thing. It's in the context of everything else getting more expensive, right? So if you are a middle-class family that really is working the extra jobs to put your kids into school and you're being taxed a bucket load on that, to then say, oh no, now the government have intervened and now it's just out of your reach, it doesn't leave a good taste in people's mouths that are working hard. It's not just about sort of the rich being elitist and all that kind of stuff. That's, you know, of course there's probably some of that, but for a lot of middle-class working people that say, no, the schools around here, they're not the kind of schools we want to send our kids to, we're going to take a financial hit and do it. To have something else, in the context of everything else, get just that little bit out of reach for people, it's not a good look.
And also for parents, it's a priority. These parents are working many jobs to fund their children to go to private school. That is a choice that they have made. They are also at the same time paying for state education. There are two massively, very sort of judgmental comments from Sir Peter. He says, I don't pretend the school we went to was a state school. Starmer does. He is fudging the facts. And, I mean, if that wasn't bad enough for Keir Starmer, he then goes on to say Starmer is destroying opportunities for people to have the same chances he did.
I will say this,
though. That is blistering.
I know, but I do think, to put it in context, you know, it is 2025, not to be one of those people that say what year it is, but it's 2025. It really shouldn't matter what school your kids go to at this point. They should all be getting the best education.
But they don't.
Everyone should be coming.
Know they don't.
I know, but but I will say, in the context of this, we also need to look at the education system of, well, why would it matter what school your kids go to? They should all be coming out as intelligent as the next person.
He said, when Starmer and I were at Reigate, the school offered its pupils huge numbers of co-curricular activities, many more than local state schools could manage, which is what we know that independent schools can do. Music, drama, sport, art, D of E, CCF, public speaking, debating. He goes further to say the Prime Minister should know better. He should want more children from low and middle income homes to have access to independent schools, as we both did, not fewer. He shouldn't be, and I will paraphrase, we shouldn't be levelling down.
Well, he's pulling the ladder up, isn't he?
Yeah,
behind
he
him,
is.
Keir Starmer.
Yes. Now, obviously, the Prime Minister, this is going to make very difficult reading for the Prime Minister, but you mentioned this word about ideology. This is about ideology. Rachel Reeves, I think, in the past has said she wants to smash independent schools.
Yeah, and it's just there's no need for it. I think is the thing. There's no need for it. This didn't need tinkering with. It was working fine. There was no need to come after it. And now they've put more pressure on other schools. You've got disenfranchised people that were sending their children to school and now can't afford to. You've got kids that'll be displaced. Why create this mess? Why? There was no logical reason.
Well, and the other thing is, according to the Treasury themselves, 6% of the independent school population could be forced out by their own policy. That is 37,000 kids who are thrown out in the middle of the school year. I think it's diabolical, actually. So many messages coming in. I'm asking this morning, I mean, the Labour Party is in complete disarray. We'll show you some of the political polls in a moment. Reform riding high. Nigel Farage taking the fight very much to Kemi Badenoch's constituency last night. But in terms of the Labour Party itself, is the Labour Party the problem in terms of their electoral chances, or is it Keir Starmer, or is it both? The number 0344 499 1000. You can text the word talk in your message to 87222. You can message us on X as well at talkTV. You can send a voice note as well. Let me know your thoughts, please, on Starmer fudging the facts over his schooling. So many messages coming in as well. Sean in Gloucester, good morning. Good morning, David. Your show starts my weekend the best way. Isn't that nice? It's very nice. Thank you very much. Whether the policy of targeting the long-term sick is right or not, it doesn't matter. This loony Labour government are already in the same position as the Tories, and no one listens and no one believes them. They've proved themselves to be nothing short of liars, fanatics and self-serving hypocrites. We need a massive reset that can only be done by someone fresh. Step forward, Nigel, and reform. David, Reeves is clearly out of her depth. AstraZeneca, this is the story in the front page of the FT here. So there's a deal for AstraZeneca to build a big factory in the United Kingdom. So the government had to stick in 90 million quid, 20 million of which, by the way, was on R&D and also training of young scientists in this country. That's the kind of industry we need in this country. The Labour Party has managed to mess that up. AstraZeneca, David, is a perfect example of how Reeves is out of her depth. It would have been good at so many levels for the United Kingdom. Maybe she didn't want to invest in the private sector. Does Reeves know what she's doing?
It doesn't seem that way. I mean, I don't want to completely badmouth her, but the decision, we're not getting the results, right? I mean, if this were the private sector, she would have been let go by now.
Yeah, and I also mentioned that maybe sort of the button that Keir Starmer needs to press is the Rachel Reeves eject button and get in another Chancellor. Rachel Reeves, who would replace her though, David? This is Bill in Cheshire, one of our regulars. Good morning, Bill. David, who would replace her? There is zero business experience on Labour's front bench. Plenty of lawyers, union jobs worse than public sectors has been. So who, David, would replace her? I don't know. Of course, hiding in plain sight is the great Diane Abbott. She's good with sums. We'll take a break. This is Weekend Breakfast. Good morning.
Difficult problem the government have is there's a gap in the fact that, you know, the budget massively put up taxes, but also massively put up spending. But if you look at the forecast of GDP figures that were published last November, you know, by the end of this parliament, the public spending is dropping off, or not going up as quickly as you'd think it was. And then, you know, you're completely right to say, you know, Michael Lear is completely right as well to say, look, well, all this stuff that was announced yesterday is going to take 20 years perhaps to kick in. There's going to be a big gap in the middle.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. 20 minutes past 7 on Saturday, February the 1st. Loads of messages coming in talking about disability benefit cuts, which is the government's new great plan. This is front page of the Times this morning. This is interesting, actually. This is Glyn in Grantham. Good morning to you. Good morning, David. Just a point on benefits. I first went to the doctors in 2019 with a bad knee. 2020, I was told I need a replacement. I'm still waiting. Would have been years ago if I got something sorted. And that's the point, which actually you're on disability benefits until you actually get the problem sorted. But if you don't get the problem sorted, you have to remain on disability benefits. So therefore, everything comes back to the NHS, which is no surprise to me, but really good message. Thank you, Glyn. Great show. Thank you, lads. Great show, lads.
Yeah.
Good morning, David. Ditching Keir Starmer wouldn't make a difference as there isn't anyone credible to replace him. The whole lot need to go before the country is destroyed further. I'm asking, is the Labour Party the problem? Is it Keir Starmer? Should they get rid of him? Or is it the whole lot? Let me know your thoughts on all of that. Barry is in sunny Norwich. Good morning, Barry.
Good morning, my Suffolk friend. How are you?
Great rivalry between those two counties, of course.
You know we love you.
Yeah, well, obviously. Anyway, Barry, what's on your mind this morning?
Yeah, I just want to talk about the two parties, Labour and Conservative. I think this country has been badly let down by both. The Conservative Party told us 3 times that they can control immigration, stop the boats. The Labour Party have upset the pensioners. They said fuel bills wouldn't go up this year. They've gone up to over £140. Council tax is going up when he said it wasn't going to go up. You know, all they do, and, you know, I will use this word, is lie. Yeah? I watched Nigel Farage's press conference, thing on TV last night.
Oh, yeah, from North West Essex.
Yeah. He has the ability to talk to people, unlike the rest of the MPs and Starmer and Badenoch and that. You know, he understands people. They don't. You know, it's like Trump. You know, he understands people, like him or hate him. I personally love him, but, you know, he gets things done. These people don't get anything done. If they wanted to stop illegal immigration, they would stop it. They don't want to stop it.
Can I just ask you about this front page in the Daily Express? Actually, it's also I don't know if we've got the slide actually that came from the Conservative Party, because obviously yesterday was 5 years ago since Brexit, since we left the European Union. There is a slide that was posted by the Conservative Party essentially saying, we got Brexit done. And Kemi Badenoch, front page of the Daily Express, has warned that Brexit is in danger under Labour and promised to honour the will of the British people. It's blinking late, isn't it? Here's the slide. We got Brexit done by the Conservative Party. I replied to that saying this is utter nonsense.
Do you know what? When I listen to these, Priti Patel's comments yesterday, not apologising for immigration, just says it all to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Just says it all. But these MPs, Conservative, they seem to forget that they were in power for 14 years.
Well,
yeah?
I mean, it's a very good point. The point is that Brexit was a recipe. This is what we gave you, the government, right? So you now have the framework to take it forward. But they didn't, did they?
No, they haven't done anything. And, you know, I said to someone yesterday, You know, and I don't consider myself to be right wing or part of any wing, to be honest with you. I am concerned about my country, and I'm concerned about my borders. We are allowing thousands of people to come over on dinghies, mostly young men, with no identification. We don't know who they are, where they've come from, their history, what they're going to do while they're here. And, you know, it's just we can't do it no more. We just can't do it, and they're just not listening to the people. I mean, you know, I feel like a second-class citizen in my country. I walk to work some mornings about 4:45 in the morning to go to work, and I walk through the city, and I see people who are born here sleeping in shop doorways.
Yeah.
Yet these guys are coming over here illegally, and let's not forget, they're here illegally. They're breaking the law. Yet they've been put in hotels, given £45 a week, free dental care, free health care, free use of the NHS, TV, and while pensioners are shivering and freezing to death in their homes, British people are sleeping on the streets. You know, the government, any government's main priorities are its own people and its borders, and neither of these governments are doing. We haven't had a leader in this country since Margaret Thatcher. You know?
It's a very strong point, Barry. Very strong.
Yeah,
Can I just ask you, in terms of Brexit, there are a lot of people, I was talking to Lewis earlier about the chattering classes, dinner parties, people saying, oh, we made a mistake, we need to rejoin Europe. There is no doubt in my mind that Brexit hasn't been the success that it should have been. Does that mean we need to rejoin?
No, and I don't think I voted out. And the reason why Brexit hasn't been a success is because the MPs in Westminster, and we saw it at the time in 2016 with Starmer's second referendum, they didn't want to implement. They could not get their heads wrapped around the fact that the peasants, if you like, had voted for Brexit, and they couldn't get their heads around it. They didn't want to do it, and they still don't want to do it.
Can I just show you one other thing, which is Sadiq Khan. Sadiq Khan has, yesterday, 5 years since Brexit and since we left the European Union, Sadiq Khan chooses this moment to essentially issue a riposte yesterday. Have we got that I can just show you? Which is Sadiq Khan issuing a riposte, essentially saying that European citizens are welcome in the United Kingdom. Listen, Sadiq Khan, we haven't left Europe, and he says this is about not being part of Europe. We haven't left Europe, have we?
I mean, I live in I live in Norwich, which was the only city in East Anglia to vote Remain in the European elections. I live in a very left-wing city, so I'm quite a minority here, if you like.
It's on a go from Brexit. London remains a European city. Well, London is a European city, Sadiq, where European Londoners are valued and cherished. You are our neighbours, our colleagues, our friends and loved ones. Thank you for making London your home. You're wanted here. You always will be. He completely misses the point.
I think he gets confused. I mean, we haven't left Europe. We left the European Union. I think he gets confused. Yeah, right. Yeah, you know, and like I said before, you know, this city where I live voted to Remain. The only place in East Anglia that did. And I live in quite a left-wing city, and I'm quite a minority here. Yeah, you know, I've been called all kinds of stuff from people. But yeah, I mean, I vote Reform. I shall be voting for Reform in the next election, and I really do hope and pray that the two main parties get the biggest shock and Nigel Farage becomes Prime Minister of this country. So we need somebody like Trump in America. I'm really jealous of Americans at the moment, what they got. I'm really envious of them. Yeah, you know, they got somebody who's getting things done, doing it, not messing about. And yet we've got this Starmer here who just like, I don't know.
Barry, I thank you so much for your call this morning. Great points that you raised there. Lewis, that one thing that Barry mentioned was Nigel Farage's charisma, talking the language of people. He is a showman. He also understands people. He listens. We spoke about the fact that Starmer actually doesn't seem to connect with people.
Yeah, I think this is the problem, that Starmer just doesn't seem to understand these everyday people. Nigel does, and Nigel is quite good at being that sort of outsider, in a sense, that campaigner. Whether that relates into an actual political party that gets into government. I mean, the dangerous thing about all of this is if for argument's sake, if Reform does win big at the next election, if they come in with a big sweeping majority and then nothing happens and things stay the same, then I think we're in really dangerous territory.
Why do you think that would happen?
Because I think Liz Truss has not been listened to enough with what she said. Now, everyone talks about she didn't brief the markets properly, that's why she was out on her ear, blah, blah, blah. But she has since talked a lot about she was in the most powerful position in our country and couldn't change things. That there was a whole system against her, that anything she wanted to do could not be done. And so this is sort of my worry. As Barry was saying, it doesn't matter which party you have in, the same things happen. Is it the system? And in that sense, does it even matter who's at the wheel?
I mean, talking about not listening, let's talk about farmland. We've seen the protests from the farmers, of course, and they are the lifeblood of this country. And, of course, we need food security in an increasingly unstable world. More than 10% of farmland in England is set to be diverted towards helping to achieve net zero. Who voted for that?
No one. Theresa May had, I think, was it like an hour in the Commons in like 2019 and decided that. Again, which is becoming a theme of this show, it's people not listening to the politicians, not listening to the people. No, there aren't that many people that care as much about net zero as they would have people believe. And whilst looking after the planet is profoundly important and we must play our part, when you think that we emit 1% of the overall amount of carbon, and the fact that, a lot of this is saying we're net zero on paper because then we just import it in. It's like, oh, well, we didn't dig up the oil ourselves. The fact that we're going to threaten our food security to do it, I really don't think that there is much appetite for this in the country.
So the Department for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs estimates 9% of farmland needs to come out of food production by 2050 to meet these green targets. Another 5% expected to be taken out of production due to a decreased level of food output. So you've got 9 plus 5 plus 4. That's 18% of farmland that's going to be taken out. Why?
This is the problem. This is the pendulum, and what the Labour Party are doing at the moment are pushing the pendulum too far, where we'd give up things. We've got an unsafe world, David.
I know.
We need food security. If ever anything happens, we need to be able to afford to be able to feed the people in this country without relying on things to be imported. We're going to have to look after ourselves. Should, touch wood, something happen, the fact that we are going to have to be relying on solar panels. I mean, if we have blackouts, I would not want to be Ed Miliband, because people will switch so fast. Right now, I think people just think there's so much going on, although I will say the farmers really have put a good fight down.
They've certainly galvanised that fight. Let's just talk about Heathrow, of course, because Rachel Reeves, clutching into her bag of ready-made policies, she decides there's going to be a third runway at Heathrow. That's already been approved in the past. Of course, this is an old policy. It's been rehashed. Guess what? Of course, Ed Miliband nowhere to be seen, was he, on that day?
I know. I mean, where does he go from here? Under this government, they're going to build this hated by people after net zero runway. I don't really know what he would have to say for himself. Of course it's probably on a private jet somewhere.
Well, apparently Ed Miliband argued against building that third runway at a cabinet meeting on Tuesday. He voiced concerns about the environmental impact, obviously got overruled. And then, of course, he wasn't there. He didn't attend her speech. He wasn't at PMQs either. Very noticeable that he wasn't there. So we go back to this struggle and the tussle between the economy and net zero. I think if you ask the British public, what do you want? Cheap energy? Do you want interest rates to come down? Do you actually want life to be more affordable, or do you want more windmills? It's pretty obvious how they'd vote.
Yeah, I mean, this is the thing. The pendulum has gone too far. I think the majority of Brits do care about the planet, and we want to find alternative ways to not pollute, but we don't want to go at such a speed that we end up with blackouts and that it cripples our economy and we're all too poor.
Just answer me this about Sadiq Khan, because you've got the Labour government who now say they're in favour of a third runway at Heathrow. By the way, I don't think that's the answer. A very populated airport. In many ways, I like Boris Island, but that is by the way. Sadiq Khan, though, is going to launch legal action against his own government, his own party, because he's against the expansion of Heathrow. Now, come on, you've got to have a concerted policy. You have to work as a team, surely.
Well, his allegiance is, I guess, to London, and this is technically happening in London. But I do think with Sadiq Khan, he gets too big for his boots all the time. He's there commenting on international policy and Trump. It's like, just sort out crime and travel in London. That is your remit. Like, don't get involved in these bigger things. As I say, obviously, the runway is about travel and it is in London, so I guess, it's fine for him to have an opinion on it, but I think to be going sort of against your own party is odd. But I mean, Sadiq Khan, you want to talk about Keir Starmer being unpopular? Sadiq Khan is just, I don't know anyone.
Well, he got re-elected, didn't he? So
yeah, but again, with a small majority. I think there's 9 million people in London. I think there was only just over 1 million or so that voted for him.
I think there is a particular demographic that votes for Sadiq Khan. I'll leave that there. Just in terms of the Labour Party, thank you for the moment. I'm asking this morning, Labour Party seems to be in enormous difficulty, and you have Rachel Reeves on one hand, then you've got Ed Miliband, then you've got Sadiq Khan over here. No concerted policies between them. Then you've got this technocrat who's allegedly in charge called Keir Starmer. Where does the problem lie? Does it lie with those individuals? Does it lie with the Labour Party? Does it lie with Starmer? Who should they ditch? Should they ditch Rachel Reeves? Should they ditch Starmer? Let me know your thoughts. 0344 499 1000. Calls charged at the national rate. You can also text us. Text the word talk in your message to 87222. Still much more to come. By the way, Sadiq Khan, my favourite person, has managed to spend £2 million on statues and woke plaques, including plaques for LGBT people. I'll be interested to see what you think about that. This is Weekend Breakfast. Good morning.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Saturday, February the 1st. I'm David Bull, joined by Lewis Oakley this morning now, 5 years ago since we left the European Union, of course. And imagine my disgust when I saw the Conservative Party post this tweet yesterday, which I believe that we have got, where essentially they make an outlandish claim, an outrageous claim. They say they got Brexit done, did they?
No. Well, this is the thing. Yes, on paper, and I think that's the thing is with politicians now, they just want to say we signed the piece of paper, we had the date, these kind of things. Brexit is never going to be done because it's something you're going to have to be constantly working at. It's a state of mind. It's about trying to find opportunities that we wouldn't have had if we were tied into EU legislation. Now, that has definitely not done. I wouldn't say we have really had a Brexit benefit economically, because you've got so many small businesses that are suffering because they can't trade in the way they used to. You obviously got young people say we can't travel like we used to, so they have to fill in forms now. And so I just, and this is the thing, they're saying they got Brexit done, but look at that look at how hard it was to even get to that date of even signing the official thing that they got done. It was years of fighting and saying we have to have second referendums, and Theresa May trying to appease everyone.
Right, so that's the key to this, which is Theresa May, who was a Remainer, didn't want to leave. She agreed to the sequencing that was proposed by the European Union, and that was the undoing of the entire deal. And then she had Ollie Robbins, who also didn't really want to leave, who was in charge of all of that. So we ended up with a terrible deal, and as I said, I'm listening to Boris Johnson's book. He certainly was complicit in all of this as well, and he kept talking about an oven-ready deal. We didn't have an oven-ready deal. We should have walked away.
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, I don't know ins and outs of all the legislation. I think that the problem with Brexit as well is there has to be a balancing. It was a very narrow vote. So,
52 to 48.
Yeah, that's very narrow. If you'd have had sort of 70%, then you know how there's less backlash against Trump this time because his win is so big. You can't really argue with it. And I think that Brexit was so close that no one had really thought, well, what happens if it's so close? Because you've got this massive chunk of people that really don't want this, and you've got a slightly bigger majority that do. And I think that was always going to be the hard thing, in fairness, of having such a divided vote.
So I think when you listen to people who are messaging in this morning, the majority are saying we would vote in exactly the same way. What they're angry about is that the Brexit was not effected in the way that they voted for. When you look at trade, which you mentioned, we got an FTA with the European Union, which means that we avoided tariffs. But the problem is we got these non-tariff barriers, the ballooning of bureaucracy, as you know, the annexing of Northern Ireland, all of that is a massive problem. We knew there would be an impact to the economy, but this was a long-term gain. When you look at many estimates of what has happened, maybe we saw a reduction of, say, 6% in terms of trade, but the EU, as far as I am concerned, is not the primary goal in terms of the economy. The idea was to be a free, independent, sovereign trading nation, and we can pick our deals with whoever we want.
Well, this is the thing. As I say, it's not about getting Brexit done. It's about an ongoing thing. Right now, a Prime Minister, in theory, in charge of this country that's Brexit, should be like, oh my God, like, the lottery numbers are in. There's a new president in America that loves this country. Let's get over there now and get some trade deals going. But of course, that's not happening. And this has been the thing all along, is the politicians didn't like the outcome and have dragged their feet and have kind of appeased too much, where you've got the worst of both worlds, I guess. But I come back to it's not all about, because I think this always the media always shifts it to the economy, which is important, don't get me wrong, but I just think the majority of people didn't vote on the economy. They voted on principle.
They did indeed, and of course the idea was to also get control of immigration. Whilst EU migration has reduced as a result of this, of course, then the government, in their infinite wisdom, granted all these visas to people from all over the world. That is not controlling immigration, but it isn't, well, it is as a result of Brexit, but it was a choice made by that government.
Yeah, and as I was saying earlier, but this is the good thing now, is that these are choices made by government. They can't blame the EU for it. They have to take the flak for it.
Yes, I would agree with all of that. And of course, the whole point was about sovereignty. The other problem was that because they didn't know what they were doing, they took EU legislation, they kept it as retained EU law, shoved it onto our statute book, and Kemi Badenoch and all the rest of them said, we will repeal all of these laws. As far as I know, in terms of the 6,901 individual pieces of retained EU law, they managed to act something like 200 of them. They announced 600, they only got 200 done.
I know. But this is the thing, no one's happy.
No one is happy.
Brexiteers aren't happy because it hasn't been done to their standard. The Remainers certainly aren't happy. It's 5 years. We've got all these surveys now saying people want back in and people have learned. I think that if we ever did have another vote, though, I think it would be pretty much the same. I don't think that there would be this massive swing, because you would have the people that are saying, no, this is the will of the people, but you would also have these new people now that would say, no, this will cause too much trouble.
Yeah.
We decided something, and even though I might be a Remainer, actually, if our people give you an instruction, you better do it.
Yeah, I agree totally. Do you think Brexit has been achieved by the former Conservative Party, former Conservative government? Let me know your thoughts. 0344 499 1000. Let's talk about my favourite person, shall we? Sadiq Khan. Crime is ballooning in the capital, as we know. We've got gangs ram-raiding these shops and nicking whatever they want. Sadiq Khan, though, has handed Londoners a £2 million bill for woke nonsense. conscience. This is according to the Telegraph, as he is also cutting the capital's police budget. So I don't know where you stand on this. He's funneled cash towards 5 new rainbow plaques. Here we are. This is one. It's a great film, beautiful thing in 1996, but he's got a plaque which commemorates a beloved coming of age cinema classic. Now, 2 million quid seems an awful lot of money to be spending to have what they are calling woke statues and LGBT plaques. Surely the point about having a plaque is you are notable in history and your sexuality is irrelevant.
I mean, as someone that spends a lot of time campaigning on bisexuality, I'm not helped either way by these plaques. £2 million. I could have made those for him for $5.99. I could have done an Etsy order. We could have got those done. To me, it's about optics as well. And you have to, and I would say I'm someone as a sort of a reasonable campaigner in the LGBT space. I understand public sentiment. I understand you don't push things too far because then you'll get an even bigger blowback. To be doing this at a time where crime is ballooning, where even, I would say in myself, I now do not walk around the streets of London holding my phone. Because a concern I never would have had before, but now I'm like, don't hold your phone because anyone could grab it. That's a concern. I don't walk around holding my phone anymore. So when you've got, just everyday people having to change the way that they live, even if it's just in a small way, because they think about crime, it's like, put your things, and I think that it almost hurts LGBT people a little bit more when it's like, well, why is he spending this amount of money on this? Well, he says,
I'm spending £2.138 million in the Commission for Diversity in the Public Realm. It was established in the wake of Black Lives Matter protests in 2020. He says London's landmarks do not adequately represent the capital's history. It's led by a panel of 14 members drawn from the city's cultural and architectural institutions. He says the statues, plaques and street names don't reflect our city stories, particularly significant moments in London's LGBTQIA plus histories. Let's add some more letters to all of that, shall we, according to City Hall. I mean, I just think this will leave a very bad taste, as you say, in the council taxpayers of London, in their throats.
Yeah, which is sky high. Look, he's not wrong in the sense of, look, we probably want to update a bit of London's landmarks to reflect a bit of the modern times. It was illegal to be gay for so many years, and we're not even that far away from when it was, and actually maybe rebalancing the books on that, fine, but not when crime is this high. Or do it, fine, but as I say, do an Etsy order. You don't need to be spending that much money on things.
Yeah. Lots of messages coming in. Eleanor, good morning to you. Good morning, David. Great show as always. As for who should we discard, the whole blinking lot of them should go. Not one of them knows what they're doing. What a load of idiots. They're obviously not listening to anything that is going on in this country. Bring on reform. We are desperate as a country for change. This is Chris Gillard. Good morning to you. Chris says, I think getting rid of Starmer first would be better. Then hopefully a new leader would automatically get rid of Rachel from account. She is ruining this country. The problem is, who would you replace them with? We need a change of government ASAP. Ditching Starmer and or Rees wouldn't actually make a jot of difference, says Amanda in London, as the entire party is useless and rotten to the core. The thing that I find particularly amazing about this is how quickly the government has fallen. I don't think in history we've ever seen a government become so unpopular so quickly.
But that was always going to happen. They weren't really popular. I keep saying they weren't really popular before the election. They won by default. It wasn't a landslide. It was a sinkhole. So it was the fact that there were so many disenfranchised voters, and I think we forget about the people that just stayed home. Then you've got the split between Tories and Reform. That's what happens. Their vote actually decreased from Jeremy Corbyn. They were already going to be unpopular. And the thing is, they didn't read the room with that. They didn't think, we'll come in, we're going to have to prove our worth as we go. They've come in with big, bold ideas that have just not.
But I don't think they even had ideas. They had no idea what they were doing. They said they have a fully costed manifesto, they have policies to implement, and clearly they didn't. They're now saying to people, have you got a policy idea?
And I think the sad thing as well is they've got so many MPs now, they're not promoting young talent. Like you'll say, who would replace Rachel Reeves? Well, maybe it's someone we've never even heard of. Surely out of all of those MPs they've got someone that's really good in business that we might never have heard of, that actually they could start profiling some of the young talent they've got.
Yeah. Very good point, Lewis. Thank you. We'll take a break. After the break, we've got all the latest sporting news for you. Joining us will be Nick Ellaby, talkSport's reporter. That's all still to come. This is Weekend Breakfast. Good morning.
political problem the government have, is there's a gap in the fact that, you know, the budget massively put up taxes, but also massively put up spending. But if you look at the forecast of GDP figures that were published last November, you know, by the end of this parliament, the public spending is dropping off, or not going up as quickly as you'd think it was. And then, you know, you're completely right to say, you know, Michael Lear is completely right as well to say, look, well, all this stuff that was announced yesterday is going to take 20 years, perhaps, to kick in. There's going to be a big gap in the middle.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back, 7:51 on Saturday, February the 1st. Shall we have a change of pace? Nick Ellaby joins us this morning for all the latest sport. Good morning.
Good morning.
How are you?
doing? I'm all right, yeah.
Nice to see you.
Well, it's nice to see you.
Yeah, dressed down, casual look.
I was going to say, I feel slightly underdressed next to you two.
Which is very difficult on a Saturday.
Yeah, oh no, now we are on camera on TalkSport. You can get us on YouTube
Yes,
and your
how's
smart
that
TV
going?
now. Yeah, it's going pretty well, I think.
Good, yeah. Lots of
Do you do your
makeup for you.
No, we've got some lovely makeup girls that I can go and see in the morning if I need to.
Very
I'm not
good.
wearing any today, though.
You can't tell, Nick.
It's very kind.
Shall we talk about the Premier League?
Yeah, let's do it. So, well, first of all, big games today are live on TalkSport and also on this network. We've got Forest versus Brighton. Nottingham Forest are in third, really kind of the surprise package of the Premier League season. They play Brighton at home. Brighton are in ninth. Potentially, you know, Forest are kind of looking to try and get that top four and Champions League football for next season, which would be an unbelievable achievement.
Right.
And that's live on TalkSport from 12:30. We've also got Newcastle, who could end the day in third. They're in fifth in the moment in the Premier League. They're playing at home to Fulham. And again, Newcastle, one of those teams that are looking to kind of oust the traditional top four, top six teams to get into the Champions League next season. Although it looks like English teams will have 5 places in the Champions League next season because there's this thing called like European coefficient. So each countries get a certain number of clubs. Because English clubs are doing so well in Europe at the moment, in the Europa League and the Champions League, it looks like English teams will get a 5th place. So good news for Man City, who are struggling a little bit this season. We could see 5 Champions League teams from England next season.
Are you a football fan, Lewis?
No, I have to think it at home because I'm a 15-year-old that is.
Are you a Marcus Rashford fan?
No.
No, not at all.
Well, so let's talk about let's move on to talk about Marcus Rashford.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of chatter about whether he's going to leave his current club, isn't there?
Yeah, so this ongoing situation at Manchester United with Marcus Rashford, you know, once sort of the darling of the club.
Very much so.
Yeah, and also, you know, in terms of the public, made that crossover because... You know,
free school meals for kids.
He stood
and all
up to
that
the
stuff.
government on free school meals for kids. He's written really quite inspirational books as well about sporting achievement and this kind of thing. But if you ask Man United fans, they're kind of pretty exasperated with his attitude at the moment. He started well under the new coach Ruben Amorim, but is now kind of cut adrift. And in fact, this week we had Ruben Amorim saying he'd rather play his 63-year-old goalkeeping coach in the team over Marcus Rashford.
So what is underneath all of that? Is it because he's become too confident, too cocky, he thinks he's bigger than the club?
So there's a lot of talk behind the scenes. In terms of what we know, I think there's probably some things going on in Marcus Rashford's life, which means he's not maybe putting his full attention.
Well, I suppose he's young.
Into football. He's 27,
Yeah.
so in football terms, he's not young actually.
Oh, okay.
You know,
Feels very young to me.
A peak for a footballer, especially for a winger, a forward of his speed and his sort of game style, is really 25 to 29, and he's right in the middle of that at the moment. So he has to get a move. He wants to play for England in the World Cup under Thomas Tuchel, the new German manager, which is next year. And if he's got any chance of getting in the squad, he needs a move. Now, he can't go to Milan, who are interested in buying him because they've now picked up Kyle Walker, so they can't get any more English players on loan. That's a post-Brexit deal. That's reducing that. And then there are a few other clubs.
Don't wade into that.
I'll happily wade into that any time you want.
I don't think we've got time.
There are a few other clubs around Europe may be interested, but the problem with Marcus Rashford, he's getting 350 grand a week. And so either Man United would have to pay part of his fee if he goes on loan somewhere, or a club's going to have to pick up that on top of a big transfer fee. Now Aston Villa are potentially looking at a kind of loan move, which will be until the end of the season, but it's still not a ringing endorsement. You know, what he really needs is to get out of Manchester United and have a fresh start somewhere else.
OK, fair enough. Six Nations.
Yeah, so started last night. Wales got absolutely pumped. They've now... They lost.
Sorry, I shouldn't laugh.
Well, I mean, no, we shouldn't laugh.
No.
43-0 they lost in Paris. So France scored
that's
7 tries, and actually Wales's record-breaking losing run is now 13 games. They've lost 13 games in a row. There was, you know, their New Zealand coach Warren Gatland is under serious pressure. They play Italy next, so that's a big one for them because it looks like they could go through the Six Nations getting beaten by everyone. And then today we've got Scotland versus Italy. That's up in Edinburgh this afternoon, and then later on 4:45. Ireland versus England. England are the underdogs in Dublin, so expect fireworks in that game because all the players are playing for. There's a British and Irish Lions tour to Australia this summer, which will be live on talkSPORT, and so selection is on the line for that.
Right. The stakes are high, Nick.
Stakes are always high.
Yeah. Nick, really good to see you. Thank you very much indeed.
Cheers,
That's Nick Ellaby there with all the latest sporting headlines. I'm asking this morning just in terms of the current government, Labour in a very precarious position, I think you will agree. Also, the fighting between Ed Miliband, Rachel Reeves, then you've got Keir Starmer, the technocrat who's not listening to the country. So I'm asking this morning, what is the problem? Is it the Labour Party? Is it the personnel within the Labour Party? Is it Keir Starmer? Let me know your thoughts. 0344 499 1000. You can text the word talk in your message to 87222. Very quickly before Lewis leaves us, let's talk about your papers that you've chosen. This is a story in the Times, page 15. Put down your phone. Why?
Yeah, listen to this. So, AI technology is being rolled out in millions of cars that can now identify if you're on the phone, smoking, wearing your seatbelt, as well as your age, sex, weight, and mood. So basically, and this is all being rolled out, and all cars will have to have it by, I think it's 2026 in Europe. The AI camera will be in the steering wheel watching you and sort of monitoring everything. And I'm guessing maybe even shut down the car if you're breaking the rules. So
how do you feel about that?
It's an interesting one because I love AI, but I do think this is a step too far. If you've passed your driving test, the society trusts you to be able to manage that car. You shouldn't need to be monitored. It's a very creepy way to go, even though I think it would probably save some lives. So it's a bit of a tricky one.
I mean, a roll on autonomous vehicles, actually, that's I think that's the panacea, is to have something where you summon a car, it comes, it arrives, it picks you up and takes you somewhere.
See, I've spent so much time trying to pass my driving test. I really want to be in control of a vehicle.
All right, fair enough. Shall we also talk about the Daily Express, page 3? What do we want in 2025?
So this is a cute story. It's all of the little things that people want. Good news is topping the list there. Just having good news, a hug from a loved one, and spending more time on exercise and hobbies. So just those little things. We don't all need to go out and have massive goals for 2025. Just those little things that we forget and take for granted.
I think there's something really interesting underpinning this, which is lots of people of your age, my age, re-evaluating... No, that's why I said your age and my age, because they're different ages. Thank you for that. But re-evaluating their lives, thinking, I'm working all of the hours that God sends. I'm paying tons of tax. What am I getting in response to all of that? But also, what about my work-life balance? And actually, lots of people I know are rethinking their lives.
Myself included. I just had to do my tax bill for 23 to 24, and I basically may as well not have bothered working. And so I'm reevaluating. What's the point?
What's the point? Well, you have to bring in income, I suppose, to feed your family.
It's about the additional income.
Yes.
So it's all coming to see you, waking up at 3 a.m. all of the other stuff I do.
It's a great joy.
Basically, if I want to do it, all goes HMRC.
Lucky them. Lewis, thank you so much for coming in this morning.
Thank you so much.
Really good to see you. Keep all your messages coming in, please. The Labour Party, who's at fault? Is it the party? Is it the personnel within that party? Is it Keir Starmer? Who would you get rid of if you had that big red button? Who would you eject and why? The number 0344 499 1000. Lots of you getting in touch. Good morning, David says, Peter, I don't believe removing Starmer would make any difference at all. The whole lot of them are liars. They're hypocrites. I'm 73. say I've never felt so politically exercised, and that's probably because I have never known such an awful government. After the break, we're going to be popping across to the United States. I'll be joined by Caroline Faraday, who will be telling us all the latest news from the United States. And, of course, we have our head-to-head this morning. That's all still to come here on Weekend Breakfast. And Gerald Howarth, that's at 9. Don't go anywhere.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, a very good morning to you just after 8 o'clock on Saturday, February the 1st. I'm David Bull, and this is Weekend Breakfast. Pinch and a punch. Yeah, pinch and a punch for the 1st of the month. Dry January is over. It's time for Feasting February. Yes, all to look forward to. And, of course, it looks like spring is on the way, maybe, just possibly. Let's talk about more good news this morning. It's St. Bridget's Day today. Well, who is she? She's one of Ireland's most beloved saints, and today celebrates her legacy as a symbol of generosity, of compassion and creativity. In Irish folklore, she is portrayed as protector of the home, a healer and a spiritual guide. Today is a day of reflection, of renewal and celebration of nature's cycles. Also today, it's Dark Chocolate Day today, a day that encourages you to savour the bittersweet chocolate and appreciate its many health benefits. It's high in antioxidants, in fibre, in minerals, and it's lower in sugar than other chocolate. Yum, yum. Oh, very good, very good. Also, happy birthday to Stephanie of Monaco. She, of course, is the sister of Albert II and daughter of Rainier III and Grace Kelly. Happy birthday to you. Let's move on to... Yay! Let's move on to today's fascinating facts.
Today's fascinating facts.
Oh dear, I don't know what's wrong with me. Good morning, good morning. Right, on this day in 1884, the first volume, which was A to Ant of the Oxford English Dictionary, was published. This is brilliant. James Murray, who was its most famous editor, he worked there 44 hours per week for 35 years and only got to the letter T. Hundreds of people then sent in their own contributions. On this day in 1939, there was a white paper, a British white paper, proposing the formation of the Home Guard. Of course, as we know, the Home Guard became known as Dad's Army because of the average age of the volunteers. It was published on this day in 1939. It's worth mentioning Dad's Army, of course, as well, which was a great television programme, hugely popular. First aired on the 31st of July 1968. It ran for 9 series until the 13th of November 1977. And finally, on this day in 1965, prescriptions on the NHS became free of charge. They remained free of charge until June of 1968, and those are this hour's fascinating facts.
Start your weekend the David Bull way. With stories and laughter, we rise and shine. Saturday and Sunday's your time to unwind.
Well, a very good morning to you. 5 minutes past 8 on Saturday, the 1st of February. Lots going on in the newspapers this morning. The front page of the Times, long-term sick facing crackdown on benefits. The government desperate for money. Now they've decided that disability benefits is the latest policy that they want to pursue. I was talking about just the number, 65 million spent on disability benefits. We only spend 60 million on the armed forces. So that is worth thinking about. Their billion, sorry, not million. 65 billion on sickness benefits, 60 billion on defence, and dwarfing the 20 billion spent on the police. This is a huge story as well. Keir Starmer has been fudging his facts over his schooling. This is worth a read. This is the front page of the Daily Telegraph. Sir Keir Starmer has been accused by Britain's most eminent social mobility expert of fudging the facts. Now, as you may remember, Keir Starmer keeps impressing upon the nation that he went to a state school. Well, according to Sir Peter Lample, who's a former advisor to Sir Tony Blair and founder of the Sutton Trust, and by the way, he went to the same school as Starmer, he went to Reigate Grammar. He accuses the Prime Minister of pretending it was a state school, and it wasn't. So the school was funded by the council when Keir Starmer joined, but 2 years later it became an independent school, so a private school. As a result, the local authority paid the bursary that covered Keir Starmer. So it was a private school, but he got a bursary from the council. So they decided they would actually pay for those people who had enrolled before the conversion, and he got a bursary to continue his studies into the sixth form. So Sir Peter says, I don't pretend the school we went to was a state school. Starmer does. He is fudging the facts. It's pretty eviscerating, actually, what he says about this and about Labour. He says Labour's regressive VAT policy on private schools will deprive thousands of children of the opportunities that he and Keir Starmer got. So those are two of the big stories this morning. So Labour obviously has a problem. The question I'm asking this morning, is it the Labour Party? Is it the various factions within the Labour Party? Is it Rachel Reeves, who clearly doesn't know what she's doing as Chancellor? Is it Ed Miliband, who has this kind of deity-like complex in the drive to net zero? Or is it Keir Starmer? Is it Keir Starmer himself, who is this technocratic head boy of Labour, who is not in touch with the population of Britain? Where does the problem lie? Let me know. 0344 499 1000. Those calls charged at the national rate. Text the word talk in your message to 87222. You can message us on our X as well at talkTV. But now it's time for Transatlantic Talk.
Transatlantic Talk with Caroline Faraday.
Yeehaw, Caroline Faraday. How are you?
Oh, what are we yee-hawing about? You're
Wow.
all jolly and I'm in America and we've got nothing to be happy about.
No. I mean, honestly, the news just becomes increasingly difficult to stomach, doesn't it, from there? Shall we start with this Philadelphia plane crash and just utter horror?
Yeah, well, so the Philadelphia plane crash comes quickly off the back of what happened in Washington, D.C. But this is a medivac, like a moving a patient, in fact, moving a child patient, and all six that came down in Philadelphia. There's erupted into fire, and all six people on board. Obviously, all eyes are on the sky, particularly this week after what happened Wednesday night in Washington, D.C., as bodies are still being recovered from the Potomac River. It's actually a really unpleasant and difficult recovery effort there in D.C. They've got all this, it's very cold, and then they've got all this fog, so it's not easy for them to see. It's in the river. It's a very unpleasant, difficult, challenging task for them to recover either remains or bodies from that river, where all of the passengers on board that passenger flight from Wichita, Kansas, involved in that accident with the Black Hawk helicopter, died. I mean, just horrendous.
It is just horrendous, actually. And of course, the investigators have now recovered both of the black boxes, which in some small solace it is some way towards solving the problem. There are a lot of unanswered questions here, aren't there? And of course, Washington, D.C. has very crowded airspace, military helicopters often in that airspace, along with commercial airliners. It seems extraordinary that something like this could happen in this day and age with the amount of technology on both aircraft.
I have a slightly different outlook, I think, after spending so long in a light aircraft over London in early on in my career.
Yes, of course. It's the flying eye.
But I always think people think that flying is this very technologically advanced thing, but actually it's quite basic, and not particularly fancy, I think. And a lot of it is, do you see that plane? Can you see that over there? And that does seem to be, this was something that happened visually or didn't happen visually, for these two aircraft, where without preempting the investigation, where they obviously did not see each other, and that happened. It's fairly standard. I mean, to use a river, and I've flown in a helicopter across the Heathrow flight path, which is a much busier airport, I should say. So it is a busy airspace, yes, but it is not unusual for that to be the pattern that is happening there.
No, absolutely.
So there's that, and then obviously lots of questions. Changes at the top of the people responsible for air traffic controllers in recent times. So lots of kind of eyes there. From the White House, there's been a lot of blame on DEI policies and people questioning how at this point you could possibly draw that conclusion.
Can I just go back? Let's just unpick that a bit. Let's just go back to air traffic control. Last night when I went to bed, there were lots of questions about whether it was under-resourced and whether the air traffic controllers themselves were actually stretched too thinly, and they were dealing not only with that commercial jet but dealing with the helicopter as well, and those should be two distinct roles.
Yeah, essentially they were. It was, I think that the phrase they've used is not normal staffing, but overall they are understaffed. And that has been the case for some time. And then also in the mix of that is a lot of questions about what happened since January the 20th in terms of federal staff and federal staffing. The head of the FAA, who are responsible, essentially resigned his post, but was asked to do so. So there've been changes in that field as well. So yes, were they understaffed? And that is clearly a line of questioning for investigators.
So let's move on to what Trump said. I mean, I think it was pretty inflammatory what he said. He blamed diversity initiatives at the FAA for the deadly crash that occurred. He started talking about diversity and inclusion, and you can have your own thoughts on all of that. He talked about those people with disabilities being hired over and above people who might be more competent for those jobs. I thought, even if that is true, I felt it was distasteful to bring it up at that moment.
Well, there's no evidence to suggest that any of the people who may or may not be responsible for the accident that happened in Washington were in any way DEI hires, right? And then also his spokesperson went a step further, Caroline Levitt, she's called, and when she was questioned about, hey, where's he drawing this conclusion for? What evidence he got? She said, well, he's drawing it from facts. So we never got to find out what these facts were. But she then went on to say, and I'm slightly paraphrasing because I haven't got the exact quote in front of me, but basically it was, well, when you're flying in a plane, all you care about is whether or not it flies safely. You don't care whether or not your aircraft has a black or brown pilot. And so I think it's a reasonable lens to see that as a very offensive, inflammatory, divisive comment to try and blame an air crash either on disabled people or people of colour.
Well, I think also the fact is, and you're right about this, what you need is the facts in front of you before you leap to conclusions about any of this, and that is the one thing he doesn't have. When he was actually asked by a reporter why he felt it was DEI initiatives that were to blame for all of this, he had a bizarre response. He says, because I have common sense. I mean, how is that playing in the States, that kind of comment?
I think, like, it's all been coming so fast in the last week in the States, and people are aware of the kind of personality that Donald Trump is. But there has been extreme offence and pushback against the remarks that have been made at a time when this would be an opportunity for Donald Trump to offer condolences, to reassure people about safety when they're flying.
And I think that's something
that's needed.
Clearly is of paramount importance, isn't it, for those people who are taking flights?
He almost made light of it. He said, what do you want? You know, they said, are you going to visit the site? He said, what do you want me to do? Go swimming? I mean, it's really very offensive. People have lost their family members. A lot of people were young people coming back from a figure skating championship in Wichita, Kansas. It is each and every single person on that plane had you know, people who love them and people who are just absolutely devastated. So to make light of it and to jump forward in the conclusions of what happened, I think is something that people have been quite shocked by. Are you shocked that it came from Donald Trump? No.
No. I mean, shock and awe, that's his mantra, I suppose. Just going back to the Philadelphia plane crash, again, this is a very strange plane crash, a Learjet 55. Do we know any more detail about this?
No, it does sound at this stage, and again, I can't preempt it, the information that's coming out sounds like that is the only aircraft involved in that collision, and I suspect it's something that may not have the attention that it would have had it not been for the much bigger air crash in Washington, because of course now there's focus on safety in our skies and flying and air safety, and people are on edge, and really that's what I'm saying about leadership is you know, this is a time where people need reassurance and not to have, you know, further undermining of whether or not we're safe. You know, you want to be reassured and told we're going to do everything within our powers to make sure that flying is safe, that when you take off, you get where you're supposed to be. And you know, that is a really important factor, and not blaming or trying to politicise what has happened.
Yeah. I'm very mindful of the fact that the takeoff and landing are the most dangerous parts of any plane journey. I've always thought that. And of course, that has been borne out. It remains to be seen what we uncover, particularly from those black boxes. Has anything fun happened in the States? I mean, obviously, wildfires. Where are we with the wildfires? That's gone off the radar of the British press.
We had a Fire Aid concert, actually. So all the music stars came out, and they did a big fundraiser last night in Los Angeles. Went on, you know, as everyone from Billie Eilish to Stevie Wonder, Stephen Stills, you know, to Rod Stewart, to Lady Gaga, to Pink, and they did it at 2 stadiums and kind of simultaneously went between the two, raised a lot of money for victims who've lost their homes. I mean, thousands of people have lost their homes. They're just about this weekend to open up the roads to the Pacific Palisades. And I mean, I drove down there 2 weeks ago, probably now it is, or nearly 2 weeks ago, and it's a very exposed situation. And I think the concern from a lot of the people whose homes are still standing or are not standing is about whether or not the security is there for those people. But my goodness, just to have all of your belongings just trashed and in the street like that is something. Anyway, it'll help them a bit with getting their insurance and assessed and all that rebuilding
well,
stuff.
Let's hope. Let's talk about my favourite couple, Harry and Meghan, and this launch. You know, like all the channels, they always do a launch of all the upcoming programming, and of course, Harry and Meghan were the butt of a joke, weren't they?
So this was Netflix. Of course, have given Harry and Meghan quite a bit of money for their documentary, and then the Polo series that didn't really do very much. And then Meghan's got her, I don't know where she wants to be, like the new Nigella or something. You know, the homie one that's now been delayed.
With Love Meghan, it's called. With Love.
Yeah, Meghan Loves Meghan, or whatever it's called.
Meghan does love Meghan.
Anyway, so they're at this part. So they're not at this party, but John Mulaney is there, who's a comedian, and he makes a few jokes about his new chat show, which he's launching, which is like a live chat show. And he said, well, it's a really fun experiment. Not since Harry and Meghan has Netflix given more money to someone without a specific plan. And this is in front of all the Netflix bigwigs and all of these industry people. So, yeah, and that comes off the back, of course, of quite a negative piece by Vanity Fair. So, yeah, it's not exactly great news.
I mean, I would have loved to watch Bella Bajaria's face. She's the chief content officer of Netflix when that joke was being made. You're right. Now, the Vanity Fair piece, it was an 8,000-word piece suggesting that the couple, well, let's just say, didn't have any credible ideas. I mean, it's worse than that. Didn't they pitch something? Harry pitched a programme idea about interviewing psychopaths.
Yeah, listen, if you, before you get married, don't have great content ideas, there's nothing in the act of getting married that is going to suddenly turn you into a great content maker, no matter how much you aspire to it or want to be it.
No, absolutely agreed. And of course, if you remember from Spotify, Bill Simmons called them grifters. This was after their $20 million deal with the company ended prematurely in 2023. I think the most notable thing about this Netflix launch was no mention of Harry and Meghan. That's got to hurt.
Yeah, and that series has been put back. And you mentioned the Spotify, the grifters remark. I mean, they were supposed to do this whole podcast series and they just didn't produce them. This is the thing, I think, with all podcasts. People think, oh, we'll do a podcast. And most people don't get past 2. And actually, the hard work of podcasting is continually putting it out and getting the content in there. And it isn't that simple.
No, it really
And also,
isn't.
I think they want to reinvent the wheel as opposed to just putting content out there, if that makes sense.
Well, I think one of the other problems...
they want it to be huge.
But, well, they want it to be about them, and the attention span to their lifestyle is only so finite, isn't it?
Yes, but also, like, Harry's ideas. So this is me really unpicking it now. Harry's ideas are like, I'm going to interview this really big famous person. And Meghan's interviews tend to be getting really big famous people, but then getting them to listen to her talk about herself, right? That is the general pitch.
Oh, you're hard.
And no, but what I find most fascinating in this job and in your job isn't the famous people. It is the people who've got real stories to tell,
100%.
who have overcome adversity, who are thrust into situations, who have to kind of find a part of themselves that they didn't know existed, and exploring hearing about that and hearing those stories of kind of overcoming things or courage or whatever it might be. Famous people are boring. Real people are really interesting, and it would be wonderful if they decided that those were the people that they wanted to feature.
No,
but
you've just really tickled me, the idea that Meghan wants to interview people so she can talk about herself. I think that's the quote of the day, actually, Caroline. Well done. Very
That's
good.
enough about me. What do you think about me?
Absolutely. Caroline, thanks ever so much. That's Caroline Faraday over there in the United States. That was today's Transatlantic Talk.
Transatlantic Talk with Caroline Faraday.
That's enough about me. What do you think about me? Anyway, there we go. Keep all your messages coming in, please. If they ditch Keir Starmer, right, if the Labour Party decided that actually Keir Starmer should get the boot, would that improve the chances for the Labour Party? This comes on the back of the latest polls, which I'll talk about after this break, just showing how badly Labour is doing, and so quickly. I think he's now at -34 in terms of popularity rating, and also the ascendancy of other, particularly one particular political party. We'll talk about that after the break. Don't go anywhere. This is Weekend Breakfast.
Why does this matter? Because elections are years away. You know, many things can change between now and then. Maybe reform will crash and burn. I hope not. But this looks and feels like a revolution in our politics. It looks and feels like finally there is an end in sight to the two-party system. We can't say whether it will or it won't happen, but from where I'm sitting, something very exciting is underway.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. This is Talk 8:28, Saturday, February the 1st. Keep all your messages coming in. So many coming in. Joanna in Salisbury. Hi, David. I'm concerned how our youngsters are being brainwashed at school, having a very level-headed 13-year-old calling me far right. was the icing on the cake. I'm a terrible person because I don't want to let all the migrants in, legal or illegal, was the latest. Well said, Joanna. Thank you for that. Sandy, good morning to you. Dave, you can really go off people, actually. Hi, David. We're on holiday in India at the moment. You should see the pollution here. No net zero at all. That's a really good point, of course, and we're doing everything we can to get our pollution levels down, even though we contribute 1% of global emission. The whole thing is absolutely nuts. Keep all of those messages coming in. Keith is on the line in Surrey. Good morning, Keith.
Good morning, David, and thank you so much for taking my call.
Absolute pleasure.
Thank you. My question is that if, let's say in 6 months' time, another general election was called, have Reform got the personnel that will be needed to stand in all the constituencies in a general election?
You'd have to ask them. I'm obviously not here as a mouthpiece. Let me just say what I do know, which is that candidates will be stood in every constituency.
They would. They would.
Well, can I just ask you, let's just broaden that out, because I don't want it to be a Reform advert, but just in terms of Keir Starmer, Kemi Badenoch, I mean, she's made quite an interesting last-ditch attempt to capture the narrative. I will fight to honour the will of the British people. So she says, this is the front page of the Express this morning, she says Brexit is in danger under Labour, I don't disagree, and promised to honour the will of the British people. I would throw back at her that it was a Conservative government that failed to get a proper Brexit in the first place.
Well, I think that's absolutely true. I mean, I have to say, I felt that she, as a woman, and a woman of colour, might actually have made some good inroads, but actually I don't really think she's laid a glove on Keir Starmer at all.
And why is that?
Well, he doesn't appear... I mean, he's a character to me that is very much... If he gets put under pressure, he's a one-word answer. If anybody asks him something, he might just say no and sit down, and that just shuts it down. I mean, she's a very polite, has a lovely voice... But actually, she doesn't seem to my mind anyway, cut through. And as I say, lay a glove on him, I think, sadly.
I think, Keith, you have a very strong point there. Thank you very much indeed for your call. Let's take a voice note now. This is Anna in Surrey. Good morning, Anna.
Morning, David. Sorry, but on this particular sickness issue, I totally disagree with you. My contract with the government was that I pay, you take care of myself and my citizens, my fellow citizens. Yeah. Instead of attacking the sick, why don't you attack the immigrants? Why don't you attack the overstayers? Why don't you attack the five-star hotels? Let's build a fence, shove them in it, shove them on a boat offshore. I don't care where you shove them. Let's get rid of them and start looking after our own. Our country is supposed to take care of its vulnerable. We don't attack a whole syndicate of people with mental and physical issues for the odd one or two, as you say, swing in the lead. The swing in the leaders, yeah, put them to work in the field. I don't care where you put them. But please, let's get our priorities right. Let's take care of our sick. Thank you, David. Bye-bye.
Wow, that's me told. Thank you very much, though. Really passionate voice note there. I'm going to put that to the head-to-head guess because that's next. This is Head-to-Head. Head-to-Head. Joining me this morning, Will Kingston, political commentator and The Spectator, in the studio, and also joining him, James Matthewson, former Labour advisor. Good morning to the two of you.
G'day, David. That voice note's really fired me up. I missed my coffee this morning, but that's all I need to get going.
Let's start with that if we can. And I know it's a bit tricky, and thank you very much indeed for doing this, James. I know we had a guest drop out, so thanks ever so much for that. So this is the big story, front page of the Times this morning. The long-term sick will be required to look for work, and many will see their benefits cut as part of an overhaul of welfare being drawn up by ministers. This is Liz Kendall. I mean, when you look at the sheer numbers here, we are spending 65 billion quid on sickness benefit. We only spend 60 billion on defence. We spend 20 billion on the police, and we spend 6 billion on illegal migrants. There is a point to all of this. My big concern is that the people who rightly needed disability benefits, it has been very easy to stay on disability benefits. You don't have to prove that you need to remain on those disability benefits, and you're not looking for work. There's also this catch-22. If you do get a job and you don't actually work out of that, you've lost your benefits, and there's no incentive to therefore do it.
Yeah, that's right. I think two things can be true at the same time here. Everything that Anna said around illegal immigrants and the burden of the economy around that is true. At the same time, the problem with the ballooning expenditure in health is that so many things that 30 or 40 years ago we would have just thought of being the difficulties of life have now become a disability, particularly around mental illness, where of course there are some things which are legitimate mental illnesses, but it is ballooning around, in inverted commas, anxiety or depression. And you know what? The best way to get over anxiety or depression is to actually become useful again and get yourself back into work. So I think there are areas where we do need to clamp down.
Let me bring you in, James, if I may. I think Will makes a very good point here. This is the over-medicalisation of life stresses and strains. A lot of these kids are saying, well, I'm anxious, I can't go to work, I've got disabilities, I need to be on benefits.
Yeah, and why not? I mean, if they are suffering with a condition that is medical, which is recognised as anxiety and depression are, then they should receive treatment for that and support for that. If part of that process of getting better means that they're sick and they cannot work for the time being, then that's just part of life's costs. And if we are a society, and if we are aiming to do a welfare state, as was the initial vision of creating a welfare state and having a welfare state, we should be able to accept the cost of that. And look, things are expensive. All right, when we measure things up...
Hang on a minute, wait. So
there is a cost.
Hang on, let me just throw this back at you. Look, I'm anxious, I'm tired, I want to be signed off, I want disability benefits. Where do you draw the line?
Well, are you, David?
Well, I'm often anxious. The point I'm trying to make is actually you can have a diagnosis. There seems to be no follow-up on any of this. So let's say you do suffer from anxiety, and I think the point that Will was making was that if you're anxious, the best thing for you is to have social contact with other people to get back into the workforce. If you are sitting at home, all it does is reinforce your own behaviour.
Great. I mean, forgive me if I don't want Will deciding what's best for me when I'm sick and when I'm ill. But there has been anxious, and there is having anxiety. There are completely separate things.
All right, let's talk about having anxiety.
Everybody suffers anxiety at some point in their life, but people with severe anxiety, a lot of people, 1 in 3 people now, will suffer with mental health issues, and these are mental health issues.
Why are they skyrocketing, do you think?
I think because of the world we live in right now, it is a very anxious time, but also things like social media, the internet. We've got a generation of kids who've grown up in a world with access to not just information that is overwhelming and overstimulating, but, people are also able to talk about these things more. And I think we often paint that as a negative in the sense that people, we're getting softer, we're getting, we need to just crack on and work. There's only one person who benefits from that, and it's bosses. Why is anybody on the side of bosses? People who want to make money.
Why is anybody on the side of bosses? Because they underpin the economy. They employ people.
But they're not going to show compassion to somebody when their main objective is to make money off the back of them.
That is utter nonsense. Let me just throw. Let me give this to Will to have a riposte.
Yeah, it's just kind of lazy, old, pseudo-Marxist nonsense from James, from someone who's never had a proper job in his life. Look, the fact of the matter is that if you want to go to that line of thinking, it is in a boss's interest to have a workforce that is healthy and that is motivated. They're not just kind of old Marxian tropes of someone evil trying to take advantage of them. But the other thing is, and you made this point, David, the question is, where is the line when it comes to mental health issues? And at the moment, that line is being drawn way too broadly. And unfortunately, until we get that under control, this welfare state, which James seems to enjoy, is going absolutely bananas. And we cannot have a growth economy, which is meant to be the mantra of this Labor government. You cannot have a growth economy and the type of welfare state that we currently see in the UK today.
James. It's not true. It simply isn't true. And also the fact, I don't know about you, what have I done for my career? What have I done in my jobs? You tell me.
Yes, it was a personal attack. Let's leave that aside. But I just want to go back to this idea that what we're doing is we're normalising the fact that people are allowing to be at home, to be on disability benefits. There are no checks and balances. So it is easy to...
There are checks and balances.
There are very few checks and balances, and that is what the government... Well, let me just answer you this then. Why is the Labour government deciding that there is a problem? That is a very unusual position for a Labour government to be in.
It is, yeah, it is. And there's, there will will be disappointment across the Labour movement. I understand that Labour in government are often very different to, Labour in opposition. That's the same.
Is
with
that
any
realism?
Political party. It's realism, because of course there is cost, and there is an economy to get right, and there is money, and welfare is never something that is easy to sell, because people will come on the air and bash it all day long. But unfortunately, when it comes to something like welfare, we have a real responsibility, because people who are on welfare are vulnerable.
I agree with that, but not everyone on welfare is vulnerable. That's the point I'm making.
No, that's great, but as your caller, whilst I vehemently disagree with her on the immigration stuff, our point is, why are we bashing people at the bottom of the tree? Why are we looking at people in that space and saying, you are the problem, you need to get right, when the money that is taken is minimal? If you are talking about a few people who you don't think are entitled to
How do you think it's a few? Why do you know it's a few?
They're not working.
That's the point I'm trying to get at. How do you know it's a few people?
Because just generally, David, coming from deprived communities, we all know the people. We know a few people here and there who are possibly not entitled to what they're getting by the standards of the state. But it is so minimal, the money that these people are claiming, and the quality of their life. What do people think the quality of life is on welfare benefits? What do we think the money that they're getting is? Have you ever tried doing
I have seen people who are living very happy, content lives on the state. Let me just give Will let me just let Will respond to that before the break.
Look, the fact of the matter is, I'm sure everyone would want people to have money and be comfortable. The question which no one on the left really wants to answer is, how do you pay for all this stuff? And we're living in a country which is very quickly going bankrupt. So if you're going to say we want to have this high welfare state, you're going to have to say, how do you pay for it? I imagine the answer from James would be something like, well, we raise taxes. And if you want to do that, that's fine, but at least be open about it and cut this go for growth mantra, because you cannot keep raising taxes and have a growth mantra at the same time. They are fundamentally incompatible.
Will and James, just pause where you are. We'll continue our head-to-head after this break. This is Weekend Breakfast. Good morning.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk 8:43. We're in the middle of a very heated head-to-head with Will Kingston, political commentator of The Spectator, here in the studio, and joining him, James Matthewson, former Labour advisor, who is down the line. Gentlemen, let's move on to this huge story, which is in the Daily Telegraph front page. Starmer is fudging the facts over his schooling. Sir Keir Starmer has been accused by Britain's most eminent social mobility expert of fudging the facts. This is Sir Peter Lample. He was actually described as Tony Blair's favourite millionaire. He's a former advisor to Tony Blair. He's founder of the Sutton Trust. Now, he says that he's basically attacking the Prime Minister's VAT raid on private schools. Now, he went to the same school as Sir Keir Starmer. He accuses the Prime Minister of pretending it was a state school. It was actually an independent school. It was funded by the council for 2 years, and then when Keir Starmer, when he joined, but 2 years later it became an independent school. Then Keir Starmer got a bursary to the independent school, and so what Peter Lample is saying that Starmer has not exactly been open and honest about the truth, and he goes further to say Starmer is destroying the opportunities to have the same chances he had. That's pretty damning, isn't it, Will?
Yeah, well, he's right. And look, this isn't complicated. For the majority of the time that Starmer was at that school, it was a privately funded education institution. It was a private school. The bigger thing which I think is interesting with these guys is, despite the Labor Party now undoubtedly being the party of the elites, they're still desperate for their humble beginnings origin story. And it goes to show that they have this tension on the left, not just in the UK actually, across the world, where they've got their working class origins and yet they've now transitioned to being an elitist party. And they're trying to balance these two things. And in the end, they're not actually doing either particularly effectively, which is why you're seeing in the polls the Labor Party is going backwards.
Can I just bring you in there, if I may, James? Just in terms of this, I have a particular bee in my bonnet over this. I think this is about belief structure in Labour imposing VAT on private schools, and this is the icing on the cake, that Keir Starmer has essentially lied to the British public by saying, I went to a state school. Well, look, Keir Starmer, it wasn't. And Peter Lample goes one step further to say he is denying other kids opportunities that he had. And what we know is that the private schools offer bursaries to kids from less fortunate backgrounds and provide a different kind of education. I just think it's pretty damning. Your thoughts?
I think there's two separate things to discuss. I think there's the Keir Starmer and his claims issue. I think, it's fair for discussion, and whether people, want to ask him further about that and push him on it.
OK, what do you think of those? Let's start with that.
Yeah, I do think that, at the end of the day, as Will said, the majority of the time that Keir Starmer was there, it was an independent structure. Obviously, it's transitioned from that. The local council has had responsibility. It's been a bit more like an academy trust would be.
But hang on a minute, did he go? So he says he went to a state school. That isn't true, is it?
Well, he believes that it's a state school because it was responsible to the state and because it was run by the council.
But it was an independent. Hang on a minute, it was an independent school paid for. His education was paid for by the state, and then he got a bursary, which are paid for by the fact that the private schools levy fees on parents and they offer bursaries to kids who are less well off.
Yeah, which happened obviously halfway through his schooling, was that transition to who was paying for it and why and how it was paid for, which is why the question is there. So yeah, people can hold him to account on that and ask him for further details.
So what do you think? Should he be held to account?
Well, in what way? What do you think should be done with him?
Well, he hasn't been open and honest with the British public, has he? And Peter Lample says... But Peter Lample is saying by imposing VAT on private schools, he's essentially removing the opportunities that he had.
That's the second...
OK, that's the second point. But the first point, just going back to the first point, I will use that word again, he lied. He keeps saying he went to a state school. He didn't.
Yeah, and what should we do?
No, what do you think? That is the point. It is about eroding trust in politicians, isn't it?
Absolutely. And by the way, it is a problem across politics. People aren't...
That's a deflective tactic. This is the Prime Minister.
Yeah.
Who lied to the public.
If you believe he doesn't believe he lied. That's the problem here. Well, and that's what I'm telling you.
He didn't. I mean, I feel like I'm in some ethereal dream. He didn't believe he lied. Of course, he knew where he went.
This is like the gender ideology thing. You can be whatever you want to be. Objective truth really doesn't.
Hang on. One at a time.
Objective truth really doesn't matter anymore. It's actually very handy for political commentators because you don't have to actually focus on the facts.
Hang on. Wait.
Yeah, look, of course he lied. There's no two ways about that. I don't think James is even admitting that. He doesn't quite want to say it, but he is admitting it.
James?
I'm not admitting or denying anything. I don't care for this discussion. I don't really care about it, to be honest. What we do or what we can do about it in the meantime, journalists should be able to ask them questions.
Wait.
That's
Hang on a minute, James. This is a contract with a
people. I'm not defending them.
Right. So what does it do? Right. But it's a terrible look for Labour, isn't it?
Yes.
Right.
Undoubtedly, yes, of course it is. Because it's not, it's not something that they want to have to talk about over and over again. However, I do believe that the reason it's been brought up, and the only reason it's been brought up in this instance, is to try and push an agenda about private schools that is opposed to the government's policy. That's the reason why.
It's been brought up by Peter Lampel, who said the government's policy is disgraceful and robbing kids of the opportunities that Keir Starmer himself benefited from. That's the point.
Yeah, exactly. And we see this a lot with politicians.
But he's a Labour donor.
Well, yeah, absolutely. And he should be able to criticise Keir Starmer as he has. I'm not defending Keir Starmer on this. Keir Starmer should be able to answer the questions. There should be more questions put to him about it. I believe that. But, at the same time, there is an agenda as to why it's been brought up and what the argument is on the other side.
What's the agenda? He's a Labour donor. He's saying what he's saying.
The agenda is that it's pro-private school. It's a pro-private school agenda. I mean, that's the argument he's making, is that the taxation that should be levied on private schools, the VAT that they should pay, that people should pay on the services, by the way, this is free market capitalism. If there is a business...
But there's no VAT on university fees. I have to go to a break.
VAT.
I have to go to a break. Let's just pause. We'll continue after the break.
People are infiltrating, getting away from the system. In my dad's case, they took the guy out for a cup of coffee. He said he wasn't a terrorist and he went on his way.
Right.
He even said in court it was so easy to get away from the people that were questioning him because they just said what they wanted to hear.
Yeah.
What kind of message does it send to other potential terrorists if your friend and colleague of 40 years that is a sitting MP is brutally killed and you won't even do an inquiry?
Across the UK, on DAB+, On YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk. We're in the middle of head-to-head with Will Kingston, political commentator of The Spectator, and James Matthewson, who is a former Labour advisor. Now, the question I'm asking this morning is, what is the problem with Labour? Is it Labour itself? Is it some of the constituent parts? Is it Keir Starmer himself? And the reason that I'm asking that is there's an article in The Times. The most senior ministers in Labour are very concerned, as is Keir Starmer, about Nigel Farage and Reform UK. They've now begun drawing up a detailed strategy for taking on Reform UK. It suggests that voters are also stopping, no longer listening to the main parties. Labour is attempting to address the cost of living, the state of the NHS, immigration and a state of decline. They are planning a three-pronged approach depicting Farage as a cheerleader for Putin, highlighting his support for Liz Truss's mini-budget and bringing up various comments about the role of the private sector in the NHS. But they're also worried that these claims about two-tier Keir are sticking with voters. Let me go to you, James. Where is the problem in Labour? I've never known a political party to disintegrate so quickly. Is it the lack of joined-up thinking? Is it certain characters and individuals within Labour that are the problem? Or is Keir Starmer the problem?
I don't think any of the possible problems you've pointed to are entirely correct, David. I think there's multiple issues here at play. It was never going to be easy for a Labour government when it got in, no matter who was in charge of it. It was always going to be an uphill struggle because this is what the Labour government looks like. Even Tony Blair, who had wooed the establishment entirely and who had many establishment figures on his side. It's the Labour Party still, first and foremost, and we hear the attacks and we see the attacks that have been used.
But they don't know what they're doing, do
years.
they?
So
they don't know what they're doing.
I mean, what does that mean? Define.
Well, they had a fully costed plan pre-election. Now it seems they have no plan.
I think the direction's definitely been a problem with regard to Rachel Reeves's kind of economic vision, how that's communicated. There's been challenges there, and I think there are problems, and there's been mistakes made, especially on the communications front, around what they're doing with the economy and what the vision is. And I think part of that is fear-based. I think they're scared to take a stand and say exactly what Labour's values are in government. And they shouldn't be, because they were elected. They were given a mandate democratically. They should be able to say, this is what Labour's governments look like in power. But I think, there's a huge presence in the media, a huge force in Conservative media that scares them. And that, there are debates and populist arguments coming up left, right and centre that Labour they haven't had the discussion internally to decide what their actual position is. Questions that for the past 100 years haven't been on the slate for a Labour Party to answer of itself. So, it's going to take time for them to sort things like that out.
Let me throw that over to Will, who is failing to contain his mirth.
Yeah, when in doubt, blame Rupert. I was just having a chat with Rupert by the water cooler earlier, and that big, scary media titan.
But it's the press, it's the media's fault, James says.
It's always the media's fault. It's always Rupert's fault. The two big problems. Starmer is a net liability for them. He is not a talented politician in the way that, say, Blair was. But I think the bigger problem is this is not the government for the moment. And to be fair, the Conservatives by the end were not the government for the moment either. This is a country that they have correctly identified does need to grow, but every instinct in the Labor Party is around wealth redistribution, is around tax, it is around spend. And the only way you can really get an economy growing is by lowering regulation, is by lowering taxation and reducing the size of the state. They are not capable of doing that. I can show you every possible economic indicator over the last 50 years in which the size of the state is directly correlated with low growth. This is an economic fact. It is not a up for debate. This is an economic fact.
No,
James?
it's an opinion. It's an opinion. It's very much not a fact.
In the last...
I'm not going to stand here and say that my economic worldview, as somebody on the left of politics, is fact. It's my opinion, and I'm entitled to it.
But what we are seeing is, as the tax burden goes up, as you then have employers' national insurance contributions going up, we are seeing firms that are downsizing, not employing people, or closing. That is a disaster, right?
I do not expect either of you to agree with that vision.
Well, that's a fact, isn't it?
People who are on the other side of politics.
No, hang on a minute. That's a fact. The policies enacted by Labour have actually directly caused businesses to close.
That is not a fact. It is not a fact. And it is not, you can't just represent your opinion, Will, as fact. This is the whole problem with you and with your kind of politics, is you will sit there and you will call people like me elite without any understanding of who I am. You don't know who I am. You didn't know who I was before this morning. And yet you'll paint everything opposed to you as elite whilst constantly representing the rich and the powerful.
Oh, you're the rich and powerful.
Such an elitist way of saying it.
Wait. I've got to go to a break.
No country has ever taxed or spent its way to growth. But more importantly, the Starmer government clearly, whilst it's talking growth, it doesn't have a clear plan to get there. I don't know what it was doing for the last 14 years.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. Will Kingston, political commentator at The Spectator, James Matthewson, former Labour advisor. Thank you for your time. That was today's Head-to-Head. Head-to-Head. Wow, lots of you getting in touch. So I'm asking this morning, what do you think? Let me know your thoughts on Will and indeed on James as well, and the arguments that they put forward, pro and anti the Labour government. Where's the problem lie? Is it Labour? Is it some of the people within Labour? Or is it Keir Starmer? Let me know your thoughts. 0344 499 1000. You can also text the word talk in your message to 87222. Still so much more to come. Don't forget, of course, we've got Denya's Delights. That's all still to come. Weekend breakfast here on Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello Hello, a very good morning to you. Just after 9 o'clock on Saturday, February the 1st. I'm David Bull. This is Weekend Breakfast, a pinch and a punch for the 1st of the month. Yeah, 1st of February. Amazing. Where has the time gone? The good news, of course, dry January is now over. I'll have a gin, please. Also, it's Feasting February. That is here now. And I've got other great news for you this morning because it's St. Bridget's Day today. Who is she? Well, she's one of Ireland's most beloved saints. Today celebrates her legacy as a symbol of generosity, of compassion and creativity. In Irish folklore, she is portrayed as protector of the home, a healer and a spiritual guide. And today is a day of reflection, renewal and celebration of nature's cycles. And Tommy's in there doing Irish dancing as we speak. Also today is Dark Chocolate Day, a day that encourages you to savour the bittersweet chocolate and appreciate its many health benefits. It's high in antioxidants, fibre and minerals, and it's lower in sugar than other chocolate.
And all because David Bull loves dark chocolate.
Well, happy birthday also to Stephanie of Monaco. She's the sister of Albert II and daughter of Rainier III and Grace Kelly. A very happy birthday to you. And let's move on to today's fascinating facts.
Today's fascinating facts.
Well, some new ones for you this hour. On this day in 1974, escaped great train robber Ronald Big was arrested by Brazilian police in Rio. He then escaped extradition because he was the father of a child by a Brazilian girlfriend. On this day in 1979, Trevor Francis, aged 24, became the first £1 million footballer in England, signing for Brian Clough's Nottingham Forest. And on this day in 1984, crikey, I remember this like it was yesterday, Chancellor Nigel Lawson announced that the halfpenny coin, would cease to be legal tender. Its fate was sealed. You'll love this, because it became more expensive to make it than its face value. And those are today's fascinating facts.
Start your weekend, put David Bull away. Tune in on Saturdays to Sundays to play. Join the fun from 6 till 10.
Well, a very good morning to you. 5 minutes past 9 on Saturday, February the 1st. Wow, I was thinking about this. Where has the last 5 years gone? Now, yesterday itself was 5 years ago that the UK left the European Union. I remember it very vividly, of course. We carried the Union flag out of the European Parliament. I actually remember doing an interview in this very studio when I came back to the United Kingdom. And then we left yesterday at midnight. I remember I was in Parliament Square. We had a huge party with Nigel, with various other people. And, of course, we severed those political ties that we'd held for 47 years. Now, you may remember, of course, we stayed in the EU Single Market and Customs Union for a further 11 months. And then, of course, the rest is history. And the reason I want to talk about it is because there were two articles which were written in the Telegraph, one by David Frost and one by Nigel Farage. I will just give you the headlines because it shows you sort of differing opinions. David Frost says Brexit wasn't a failure. It liberated us from the declining dictatorial EU. He goes through that, various points that he makes to try and support his argument. And then Nigel Farage says 5 years on, we still haven't taken back control. Let's get it done. Very much on the offensive. And of course, this was all about taking back control of our money, our laws and our borders. The question is, how much of a Brexit have we really achieved? I'm absolutely delighted that I'm joined now by Sir Gerald Howarth, who's a former Conservative Member of Parliament and a Defence Minister. Also, more pertinently, he was on the board of Leave Means Leave. Good morning, Gerald.
Well, good morning, Dr. David. How are you?
I'm very well indeed, thank you. It's been a long time since I've seen you, and we should be, I suppose, celebrating 5 years of Brexit, but we really haven't Brexited properly.
Well, first and foremost, David, we should be celebrating Brexit. And we should remember, as you will have read in Lord Frost's, David Frost's article in the Daily Telegraph yesterday, he reminded us of the things we have got out of. I was a defence minister. I sat round that table True, I had a veto. My colleagues in other departments had no veto. So Britain had to give up things that it didn't want to give up in order to protect things that it even more did not want to give up. So we've ended all that wrangling. We've ended having to support, for example, support Ireland when they needed a bailout from the Eurozone.
The Republic, yeah.
The Republic of Ireland. We gave them lent them £3.5 billion, and of course got absolutely no thanks for it. We've been freed in foreign policy terms. We don't have to pay £20 billion a year to their budget. We can make our own laws about vaccines. We can make our own laws about VAT. We could not do that before. So you and I need to celebrate that has been achieved. The fact that we've not done as much as you and I would like us to have done is in part down to the fact that 2 months after that historic moment at 11 p.m. on the 31st of January 2020, we were hit by the Chinese plague, COVID. And of course, that distracted every government minister. So what we would like to have done now, having got through that, is to have taken advantage even more than we did. And let us not forget that trade deals were signed around the world. We signed a very important arrangement with Australia and the United States to build a new submarine for Australia. It's called AUKUS. We were able to do all of that. We're freed. We're liberated. We've been unleashed from the shackles of that offensive flag, which I see waving in front.
Can I just ask you, though, I mean, it's such a complicated story to unpick because it's all about sequencing. I think Theresa May fell into the trap of abiding by the sequencing from the European Union. I think Boris Johnson had the right idea. And then, of course, his judgment got impaired with COVID because he was so severely ill and all the rest of it. Just in terms of that, this was always going to be a much longer term plan. I think one of the problems has been Boris Johnson's telling the electorate we've got an oven-ready deal. They didn't have an oven-ready deal, did they?
No, I think that is absolutely right to say we had an oven-ready deal. Implied, I think that we had a complete set of policies able to be put in place on the 1st of February 2020, which was, of course, not the case. And there were mistakes made. I mean, let's not beat about the bush. We should have been able to do more. I think that our problem was that Boris and his fellow ministers were in thrall to the medical, not the medical profession, but the publicly paid medical people who made decisions about our lives, which affected the private sector in their pockets, but did not affect one iota those who made the decisions. And for the politicians to have rejected the advice of the medical people at the time would have just incurred wrath of the media, who would have said, what do you as politicians know that the medical profession don't know? So no, we have not been able to take as much advantage. And had we had a Conservative government now, we would have been able to do that. The fact is we have a Labour government led by a man who not only voted Remain, don't forget, David, but had the impertinence to tell the British people that they'd got it wrong and that we needed another vote. The man does not even believe in democracy. And therefore, it is unsurprising that he's going to troop off to suck up to Brussels on Monday. The good news is, though, I don't think they want us back. In their 1950s defunct construct called the European Union. We're out of it. We're free. In fact, we've made some wrong decisions on immigration, that we've let in far too many people lawfully, let alone the wretched boats. But there's more to do getting out of the European Convention on Human Rights so that we can really tackle these people whom a great friend of mine, a former very close supporter of Margaret Thatcher and a great minister, said to me the other day, these are not asylum seekers, they are invaders. We are facing what my mother called in 1967 an alien invasion, and it lies within the power of the British government now to do something about it. We could not do it when we were in the European Union. We can do it now, and we have to make our own politicians accountable.
I mean, So you mentioned the economy there. We can argue about that. It was always going to be a much longer-term plan, this. But also, you are right to point to immigration, because I think that's the frustration that people are seeing. The whole point was we were taking back control of our money, laws and borders. And it seems that we had incredibly porous borders. That was underneath a Conservative Party. And that's legal immigration, as you rightly point out. I think there's one other thing, and it's about the way that this has been sold to the British public, which is about sovereignty and making sure that we make our own laws. We had 6,500 EU laws that were basically retained EU laws shoved onto the statute book that were never repealed. And one of the other things that springs to mind is the role of the ECHR. Surely, and I will ask you this, shouldn't we come out of the ECHR and be free to deport who we want?
Absolutely. I mean, people don't seem to understand. The European Convention on Human Rights was set up in the aftermath of the Second World War. We have just marked, horrifically, the murder of 6 million Jews. And our forebears as politicians, entirely understandably, wanted to do all they possibly could to prevent that tragedy, that appalling atrocity happening again. That's what the ECHR was set up to do. Instead, of course, it took more and more powers to tell us all what to do. It's not fit for purpose. It's beyond itself by date, certainly as far as the United Kingdom is concerned. We are even under this this current government, we are a decent and respectable people. We have a history of democracy in this country. We have a population which has a deep understanding of compassion and looking after those who can't look after themselves. We do not need foreign judges to second guess what our politicians do. It should lie in the power of the British people. And let me just say, David, on the economy, the truth is that, do you remember that those two huge documents that the Bank of England put out? There was one document which had 5 pages of algebraic formulae telling us what ghastly things were going to happen to us if we had the temerity to vote to leave the European Union. Interest rates were going to rocket. Unemployment was going to rocket. House prices were going to, I think, collapse or rocket one way or the other. The fact is, none of that happened, and we are even today we are outperforming our European neighbours in terms of the economy. Not outperforming America, but we are outperforming Germany and France in particular. So the Bank of England and the Treasury did a disreputable job trying to persuade the British people not to vote for to leave the European Union, and all their dire warnings of disaster to come about never ever happened. They betrayed their duty to the British people, and they did betray the British people. But fortunately, we celebrate. The British people gave them the traditional sign of the British archer to the French in the battles of the 14th and 15th. And Winston Churchill, of course, reminded us of that famous salute, except that it was the other way around.
Thank you, Gerald. It's very early on a Saturday morning for that. Just in terms of this, you and I agree this is always going to be a process. It's going to be a long journey, because essentially you're breaking ties of 47 years where we're so entrenched in the European Union that extrication is always going to be difficult. How much of this, though, is a communication problem? All I hear is the doomsayers, oh, Brexit's been a failure, particularly from the metropolitan and the liberal elite, saying, oh, we need to go back in. I've seen Peter Mandelson going on about it over the last few days. You've got Guy Verhofstadt also saying the Brexit experiment has failed. Surely what is needed is a communication document to the public to say, actually, this has been the success of Brexit. Is that something that's missing?
It is entirely missing, and I was intrigued to see in David Frost's article, Lord Frost, as I should call him, Lord Frost's article in the Telegraph yesterday. He has acknowledged this, and he has said, basically, watch this space. We're going to take action on this front. I sent him a text yesterday saying, absolutely right. We have been, to a certain extent, a bit complacent. We have not recognised that there is a serious risk that the Remoaners just simply won't give up. They are not satisfied with the verdict of the British people. They are arrogant. They think they know best. And it is up to us to make some of the points that Lord Frost made yesterday, and indeed Nigel Farage made in his article yesterday. You're absolutely right about sovereignty. Sovereignty is at the heart of it. We are a sovereign people, and the European Union, its whole purpose was to try to replace us. I mean, it's not rocket science. They have a flag, they have an anthem, they have a parliament. Mickey Mouse Parliament, true. Although, of course, you served in it.
I did, yes.
But it's still a Mickey Mouse Parliament, forgive me.
Very kind.
They've got a president. These are all the attributes of a nation state. They were seeking to subordinate
well, yeah,
us.
I mean, I think it's absolutely no surprise to know they're moving towards a federal Europe. That's what you want. You're also seeing other countries saying, hang on a minute, the Brits got it right. Just let me finish, if I may, Sir Gerald, because I'm sure you've got tea and toast to go to. Let me just finish by asking you, how worried are you about the Labour government and Starmer cozying up to the EU? He says we're not going to rejoin the single market, the customs union and so on. Do you believe him?
I don't know. I think that his past actions indicate exactly where his real allegiance lies. I mean, he is an international human rights lawyer. He and his attorney general, about whom I think there are very, very serious question marks. They seem to elevate their concern about international issues above the concerns of the British people. And I think we're all right to be deeply sceptical, to fear that they might cozy up. And there is one area where they might well try to cozy up, which is on defence. As a defence minister responsible for our relations with the European Union, I saw what they were trying to do. They were trying to undermine NATO. And this European defence identity, as they call it, is simply an attempt to put a brass plate in Brussels which says EU Defence Ministry, because it's all part of creating the United States of Europe as a country. And it is profoundly dangerous. It is only the war in Ukraine which has put this project on hold. But we need to be very careful, and I do remind my son-in-law, James Cartledge, who's an excellent, seriously good defence, was a seriously good defence minister, now Shadow Secretary of State for Defence. I warn him, do not allow us to be suckered into some European defence project. By all means, cooperate. We've cooperated with our European neighbours for decades on defence, but do not make this an institution which will threaten NATO, because it's NATO which has kept the peace in Europe for the last nearly 80 years.
Sir Gerald, always good to talk to you. Thank you very much for your time. Can I also say what a splendid tie that is? And I look forward to catching up in sunny Suffolk. That's Sir Gerald Howarth, their former Conservative MP, Defence Minister, and he was also on the board of Leave Means Leave. The question I'm asking this morning, Labour clearly in big trouble. Is it the Labour Party? Is it people like Ed Miliband? Is it Rachel Reeves? Or is it Keir Starmer himself? Should he go? The number 0344 499 1000. After the break, I'm going to be joined by Steve Denyer. He has all the latest showbiz news. Cannot wait. This is Weekend Breakfast. Good morning.
you've worked inside the business more than I have. How is it possible that so many of these things that Russell Brand did were not even worthy of him being sort of upbraided for, or was called in to see somebody and told, you know, you can't behave like this? You know, why didn't it happen?
None of us are perfect, you know. We have to realise.
Well, I may not be perfect, but I don't expose myself to the staff, and I don't have sex in the toilets. You know, does that make me, you know, an extraordinarily, brilliantly talented presenter because I'm the only one that doesn't do it?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Talk 9:24. Delighted to talk to Sir Gerald Howarth, a voice of reason out there. David, says Stephanie. Good morning to you, Stephanie. Let's have more of Sir Gerald. Starmer wants the EU to lead because he isn't a leader. Likewise, going to Italy to ask how you deal with migrants. Robert Morris. All parties didn't want Brexit because it was good for the people and bad for them. I didn't vote leave, but I would now. The question that is never asked is how many Remainers would now vote leave. David, this is Brad in Cambridge. Good morning, David. In my opinion, there is absolutely no point in leaving the European Union if we were not going to leave the ECHR at the same time. I totally agree, because otherwise you have your hands tied behind your back. Oh, this is good. Mark in Nottingham. Good morning. I went to Keir Starmer's school in the 1980s. If he's claiming it's a state school, he's at best misleading. It's a fee-paying independent school that offers bursaries and scholarships. That is a peach. Keep all of those messages coming in, please. One more. Graham, Mid Wales. Good morning, David. What Labour government? This is not a Labour government. It's a Marxist government. Keep all of those messages coming in. But now it's time for Denya's Delights.
Steve Denya's Entertainment News Roundup.
Oh, it's turned into Entertainment News Roundup. Good morning.
Good morning.
So it's not Delights anymore?
I don't know. Is it not?
It's an Entertainment News Roundup.
I mean, it's a delight for me every time I'm on. I mean, it goes without saying.
No, delight for me.
This is the highlight of my whole week.
It?
I'm that sad.
Is it? OK. Well, no, it's lovely. It's always lovely to see you, actually.
Great to see you.
You're the best travel man I know. You go to every premiere. You're always in the theatre. You're in the cinema. I spend the whole time in a hotel room doing notes.
You do. But I'm doing it for you, for the show. I'm doing it for the show.
You are. Now, earlier on, I spoke to Caroline Faraday. She was talking about the LA fires and the fundraiser they did over there. Tell me more.
Yeah, I mean, you know, this makes our telethons back in the day look extremely showbiz. They held a massive kind of LA fundraiser. It's called Fire Aid Show. Last night, and all the stars came out. Right. They're hoping to raise over $50 million. Billy Crystal kind of hosted this show, and he came on stage wearing the clothes that he wore that night. He was told, you have to flee. He lost his home. Of course, so many homes, so much devastation, billions of pounds, you know, kind of up in smoke, if you like. Where to begin? Alanis Morissette was there. Stevie Nicks from Fleetwood Mac was there. Katy Perry came draped in the, you know, the American flag. It was all going on. And the whole idea of doing this at the Kia Forum last night was that people could, like our old telethons, people could watch the show and pledge. Yeah, and they're hoping to make $50 million. The sponsors of the show were matching dollar for dollar as well. So hopefully it should...
And so where does the money go, and how does it get distributed?
I think at the moment it's for people who've lost their homes, people who are literally homeless. There are still people living in hotels. Oh, you can't even imagine that, can you?
No, you can't. I mean, I think,
lost
well,
everything.
if you've got cash and you're cushioned and you can stay in a hotel, and we saw all those celebrities, didn't we, actually fighting to get hotel rooms or holding themselves up in the Beverly Hills Hotel.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, just imagine losing everything. As Billy Crystal said, he said, you know, these clothes that you're seeing me wear tonight, this is all I've got left from my home. He lost his entire home. We spoke a couple of weeks ago. You see, the problem is they're not all celebrities. There are lots of people who've got these homes. They're kind of multi-generational homes.
Yeah.
So the grandparents maybe bought them when they were cheaper decades ago.
Much cheaper.
And, you know, so suddenly you live in this really desirable area and you've lost everything. Lots of people are not insured. Lots of people are being told by the insurance company, well, it's kind of an act of God. And, you know, so that's up in the air at the moment. So this was a very, very big evening. Lots of people saw this. It was being streamed. It was being shown on TV last night. But a big event last night. All eyes on LA this weekend because it's the Grammys tomorrow night.
Is it?
It is the Grammys.
That's come round again quickly.
It does, doesn't it? So we're really into kind of you know, awards season at the moment.
Do I know anyone nominated?
All right. So can I give you?
No.
I thought I'm going to have to go because basically it's an 8-hour show.
What?
It's an 8-hour show. There's something like 1 million awards tomorrow night.
At least.
Right, basically, Beyonce versus Taylor Swift. OK, so
Right.
Beyonce's up for 11 nominations. Her husband last year said, what does my girl need to do to win one of these for Best Album? Because she's lost it 4 or 5 times. All eyes tomorrow night, the Beyonce will win the Best Album. The Beatles have been nominated.
Really?
This was a long-lost song that they kind of reimagined last year, so they're up for it. The Rolling Stones were a nomination as well with their newish album. So it's quite interesting. What I'm saying is don't bother sifting through 8 hours. I'll bring you the very latest.
Very good.
When we chat next week.
OK,
but it is going ahead.
And where is that?
Well, it is, and I made a note of this. It's just been changed. It's at the Crypto.com Arena.
Where's that?
In the heart of Hollywood,
Right.
in Los Angeles. But the important thing is these award ceremonies are still going on. All eyes, of course, on the Oscars at the beginning of March. And I think it's the right thing to do. I think people are going, you know what, this has been a terrible time in our history, but we're Los Angeles. We are at the home of, you know, awards, glitz, glamour. The show must go on.
The show must go on.
And I always say that when I wake up in a bad mood.
Well, that's our mantra, isn't it? That's what we say.
It's what we do, isn't it?
It is what we do, absolutely. And I mean, certainly we're not as showbiz as the Grammys.
Well, in my head.
In our heads we are, yeah, absolutely. Now, I remember about 3,000 years ago.
Go on.
EastEnders starting, which I don't even know which year. I want to say, I'll look it up, but I imagine, I don't know, 82,
goodness
83,
me, it started
85?
mid-80s.
86, was it? 86.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, I remember that. Can we do that again?
There we go.
86.
Get out of my pub.
Yeah, get out of my pub. I loved it right at the beginning. I've lost track completely. I don't have time to watch it.
When I last watched it, Dr. Leg was in it with Mary the Punk.
Dr. Leg, yes, and Dot. I mean, Dot. We love Dot.
I mean, so it's really. I was chatting to your team earlier, and it's really interesting.
Team? It's a teamette. There's like 3 of them.
The 2 people out there and the cleaner. We've all got eras that we loved EastEnders.
That's my era.
Sonia from EastEnders.
Sonia
has been I mean, you know, I haven't seen it for years, but I remember the Sonia plots and stuff. She's been in it for, was it 32 years, Sonia Fowler, and she's exiting. And there's a big spread in today's Sun about what do you do? What do you do when you lose a character like Sonia? So we're heading towards.
Well, I should think she's pleased. She doesn't have to.
I think
learn
she's
any
exhausted. So the 40th anniversary is coming up. So the big idea of the 40th show, they're doing a live show very, very soon. But the big plot is a huge fire, an explosion that rips through the pub, and loads of people die. Hashtag cutbacks.
Just don't buy in Albert Square.
Do not.
What I would
or
say.
near the Rovers' return.
Yeah, don't go anywhere near them.
It's really bad news.
Yeah, very good.
So it's interesting to see what's going to go on there. Do you know what? I haven't seen it for decades.
Right.
But they're doing all the prep for this 40th so well. I'm quite tempted to just dip in, you know, like a week before this episode.
I would too.
To see who's in it. I mean, there's rumours that characters are going to come back in as well, you know. So
but
it would
also
be
just the
fascinating to see.
logistics, knowing this business, the logistics of filming that as a live show across multiple locations is very complicated indeed.
Of course
isn't
it is. Of course
and
it is.
so in many ways, that's why I would watch to see how it goes.
See if it messes up.
And the wonky camera shots.
Yeah.
And, you know,
I
being
take it the explosion is not going to be live. I take it that's going to be a pre-recorded.
Maybe. Well, that's the other thing. It may be live, but you don't know how much of that is pre-recorded segments within the live because they need time to reposition, I assume. I don't know.
Yeah,
have you
I would
ever
say...
been to the EastEnders set?
No, I haven't. I've been to Coronation Street.
I know you have.
I've been to Coronation Street, but no. The thing is with these soaps, the interesting aside is that there are massive cutbacks at the moment. So if you watch Coronation Street, I think they've lost about a dozen of their big characters. Right. So they just can't afford it. You know, viewing figures are going down. Do you remember the EastEnders episode on Christmas Day in '85 when Den and Ange were getting divorced? The divorce papers. I mean, what was that? 25 million people. Like we all watched it and we all had an opinion on it.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing is, you know the map, obviously, of EastEnders with the loop of the river. I was thinking about this when I saw it the other day.
Yeah.
That when it started in 1986, that was all kind of derelict, barren land out east. And, of course, that used to be the docks, and, of course, it was a wasteland. And then Heseltine, the advent of Canary Wharf, all of that came much later on.
Yeah.
I moved to the island in 2000, and there was one tower there.
Isn't that amazing?
If you go to Canary Wharf now,
so
it's Manhattan.
Around Tower Bridge, around Shad Thames, which is where, of course, Oliver Twist was filmed in the movie, you can see it in Oliver Twist. There were derelict, you know, kind of mill houses, if you like.
All gone.
And now around there, you've got the Shard, you know, where we are. You've got One Tower Bridge. It used to be basically a coach park around there. Cab drivers wouldn't drop you off. They said it's just too risky. Yeah. It's too dark. So the whole map's changed, isn't it?
Yeah,
and EastEnders is a constant, and it's constantly been on our TV since the mid-80s.
Now, I understand Ross Kemp is coming back, isn't it?
Yes, he is, yeah. So that's a really interesting, that's a really big one, isn't it?
It's grown.
It's grown.
Yeah. Excellent. Yeah. So that's EastEnders. So when is the live show?
The live show's coming up very, very soon. It's the 40th anniversary week next month, 3 weeks' time.
Okay.
So watch this space. We'll have more on that.
Okay. And just before the break, you can tell us about a documentary this weekend. Who's the documentary?
Well, do you want to do the Boyzone one? Or?
Yeah, that's what I meant.
Okay, so I've got a little clip for you. I cannot wait to see this. I've read the interviews. I've seen the bits. We're talking Boyzone. This is drops on Sky tomorrow. Take a look at this.
Boyzone band member Stephen Gately has died.
I had to call the guys and give them the news.
No, not our Stephen.
Everything had changed.
I've not spoke to Mick for 4 years.
I made choices that I'm not proud of.
I was kind of taking the mick from you when you said I can't wait to see that, and then when I saw I'd forgotten obviously about Stephen Gately and obviously the true personal stories behind the band.
Boyzone are often, it's really interesting, they're often thought of as a kind of like a young boy band that produce kind of plastic pop. But you forget, lots of those stars have done great things. Ronan Keating's had a huge career. It was absolutely tragic when they lost, you know, Stephen Gately. I mean, that rocked the showbiz world. I think what you're going to learn from here is that these guys were so young when they were put together by Louis Walsh right at the beginning of the 80s, almost as a reaction of Take That. Doing really well. So Boyzone popped up, and those songs have soundtracked our lives, whether you like it or not. They've been played at weddings. When my nan passed away, we played a Boyzone song at the funeral. You know, it wasn't one of the up-tempo ones.
Actually, not.
That would have been very inappropriate.
Really inappropriate, but quite funny.
Yeah. So it's really interesting when you see this this documentary, these 3 parts that arrive tomorrow. I think a lot of people will have an opinion on the management, how the boys were put together. They were almost a completely different band right up until the last moment. They got rid of 2 members that were never actually in the band. So they were very much crafted on looks, on ability. But they did so well. They did so well. And we're often looking back on the 90s now as the golden age, you know, with Oasis back this year, Britpop. It was a special time, the 90s. Well, I love the 80s, but I do think the 90s, you see, I was a teenager.
You're much younger than I am.
And got into my early 20s in the 90s, so it was really poignant. And that's why you like the 80s, because you're older than I am.
Much older. Thank you for that, Steve. You can leave now. We'll take a break, Steve. We'll maybe be back after this break.
Across the UK. On DAB+. On YouTube. On your mobile. And on your side. This is Talk.
I thought we were in the middle of Denya's Delights, but it's not. It's Steve Denya's entertainment news update.
Yeah, and a lot of gossip. That was gossip. How much gossip can you have in a 3.5-minute ad break?
Yeah.
That was amazing.
Don't tell people.
Good,
Don't
okay.
tell them. Now, I've seen the trailer for this, and I really want to see it. Brian and Maggie.
Oh, it's so good. It is
So this is about
good.
Brian Walden and Margaret Thatcher.
Margaret Thatcher, their final interviews.
Were they not friends?
They were. So the story goes, and you'll see this in the very first episode. The first episode is the preamble, is the build-up to that final interview. So she was his first interview at the late 70s, just before she became Prime Minister.
Right.
Okay? So, you will see brilliantly via Harriet Walter, who plays Margaret Thatcher, how she progressed through that decade. And you know what's good? She doesn't necessarily look like Margaret Thatcher, but it's all in the eyes. Can I show you a little bit? We've got the trailer here.
He's a journalist at the end of the day.
These people must always be kept at arm's length. Are we all ready to face the lens of history?
A quick intro and
Presumably a two-shot before moving to...
That's right.
Should that go, that ornament thing? It looks as if it's sticking out of my head. I want people to think I've been impaled.
Never compromise, never flinch, and you can forget your naysayers.
And I do like fun. One day, someone will come for me.
I reckon there's no one you won't be able to see off, Margaret.
Right.
It's explosive stuff. It's really, really good.
Is
like,
it?
I was absolutely gripped. I watched the first episode and thought, I've got to wait another day for the second one. I thought, oh no, the second one's there. So I just watched them completely. So the final episode is a real kind of in-depth look at that final interview and the fact that Brian Walden went for her.
Yes, I remember that.
Absolutely went for her. And it's interesting.
Even as her friend.
Well, so the friendship had kind of died off at that stage. So during the earlier part of the 80s, Margaret was phoning Brian Walden saying, can I have some advice? Can you help me with my speeches? So he probably helped a bit too much. And then she kind of stopped chatting with him.
And so he knew too much as well.
Yeah, and then he had the opportunity to interview her at this point, this really pivotal point when Nigel Lawson had quit. So it was all eyes on Margaret Thatcher and the start of her downfall. And during this interview, I think he thought, you know what, I've given you far too much kindness over the years. This is my opportunity. And he went for it, and she looked irked. Wow. And that's what happened. It's just
And
great.
so where do we see this?
It's on Channel 4.
Right.
It was on Channel 4 on Wednesday and Thursday. So you just go to Channel 4, the app, the player, and they're both there.
Fantastic.
And you can sift through the ads.
So it's just two, is it?
Just two.
Okay,
Just two.
fine.
But
And
really
how long
great.
are they?
And I've got to tell you, they're an hour each.
Oh, right.
But Steve Coogan has become one of our nation's actors. He's brilliant. I mean, bearing in mind, a year or so ago, he was playing Jimmy Savile in that show. To be doing Brian Walden, and really believable. It's the best thing I've seen in ages, so can I recommend
Okay, you can indeed. Right, let's talk about a movie to go and watch at the cinema if people are at home wondering what to do.
Yeah, this is the movie of the weekend. I was lucky enough to see this back in November. It's called Saturday Night. It's based on Saturday Night Live, SNL, an institution in America, every Saturday for the last 50 years. This is a film about the very first episode. Should we take a look?
Yes.
Okay.
is lucky to have something as relevant as this show. One they don't even want. That's logical, Dick. That's why they're paying us all to be here.
I mean, we're 90 minutes of live television by a group of 20-year-olds who've never made anything. Do you ever stop and wonder why they said yes? A counterculture show starring total unknowns with zero narrative and even less structure.
Okay.
It's great stuff. It's really good stuff.
Do you have affiliation with it? Because obviously it's an institution in the United States, but obviously it's not a show that many people in this country know.
That doesn't matter, because this is about the preamble before the show started.
Right.
This is about the preparation. So it kind of starts down as a 90-minute countdown to that very first live episode. And during the final 90 minutes, they're saying, we're not ready. We can't go on air. We're going to have to repeat an old show from, Jimmy Carson or whatever. And it's right down to the last second. And it's incredible. The guy who plays Chevy Chase is utterly amazing. There's John Belushi there being chaotic, sets falling apart. arguments happening, fires starting, and you're like, wait, this is the fastest movie I've seen in ages. And well done to Jason Reitman, he's the director. He's worked on the likes of Slumdog Millionaire, really big movies, and he put this together. So you don't need to know about Saturday Night Live.
Okay.
You just need to know about how it started and the fact that it's been on air for 50 years and we've all seen bits. It's great.
OK,
really great.
Perfect. Now, I'm just very mindful that in 15 minutes you're on Virgin.
10 o'clock this morning for Lee Francis, 10 till 1.
That's
so,
good, isn't it?
Yeah, really looking forward to that. Also got a big announcement
I shall have
about...
you in one ear and Peter Cardwell in the other.
That's the political right answer. Obviously, we speak about Latitude lots.
Yeah,
we've got a big announcement.
festival coming up.
This is great. So this is Suffolk. This is kind of like your local...
It's my local area.
Beautiful. Henman Park.
Yeah.
Absolutely
it's not,
beautiful.
I don't live there, but yeah.
No. In my head, you do, in the estate.
That's right.
Right in the middle of the pub with the pink sheep wandering around. Scouting for Girls have just announced that they are going to be one of the headliners. Alison Moyet is going to be another one.
Oh, she's good.
Got Ricky Wilson, the Kaiser Chiefs. They're going to be there in July. And
that's really grown, that festival, hasn't it?
It's great. And you know the thing I love about it? It's my birthday weekend.
Oh,
24th to the 27th.
Can we camp, though?
I have like a bell tent, I'm hoping.
Yeah.
It's still quite smelly. It's like sleeping in the middle of Wembley Stadium.
Is there a nice hotel nearby? Or you can get one of those big RVs, can't you?
Yeah. I did some research. I think so.
Don't you think?
I think so.
Be very showbiz.
Buy some big shades.
Some big shades and go backstage, and with all your contacts as well, of course, you can get VIP
It's going to be amazing. We've got loads of juice about this after 10 o'clock on Virgin Radio this morning. So, yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Happy
you
Saturday.
Better run.
Okay,
You've got 13 minutes and 15 seconds
all
to
right,
go.
I'm going.
Don't miss it.
All right.
Steve, thank you very much. Of course, that was Steve Denyer. I don't know what to call it anymore. Denya's Delights.
Steve Denyer's Entertainment News Roundup.
Well, no one told me it had changed. It's Entertainment News Roundup. But there we are. Keep all your messages coming in, please. I'm asking this morning, Labour is in trouble. What is the problem facing Labour? Is it a lack of policies? Is it the characters involved? Is it Ed Miliband? Is it Rachel Reeves? Is it head boy himself, Keir Starmer? Is that the problem? Does he need to go? 0344 499 1000. Calls charged at the national rate. You can text the word talk in your message to 87222. Loads of you getting in touch. I know lots of you have sent voice notes. We'll take some of those voice notes. I'll take your calls. I'll read your messages. All still to come after this break.
It's just repeated failings time and time again. And until we do an inquiry into each individual case, we're not going to be able to get to the bottom of what's going wrong. So I don't accept the fact that because she wasn't Home Secretary at the time, we won't get an inquiry. That's not how it works. People have launched inquiries into previous government's actions.
Yeah.
And
Well, the Post Office inquiry for a start. The Post Office inquiry is about all sorts of different governments who are responsible for it.
Yeah.
So that is completely a red herring, isn't it, to hide behind?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. This is Talk, final part of Weekend Breakfast, the time 9:50. Breaking news, IDF has confirmed it's received 3 hostages. Hamas has handed over 3 Israeli hostages. This is part of the ceasefire deal between Israel and Hamas that began on the 19th of January. Yarden Bibas, 34, Ofer Calderon, 53, they were released in southern Gaza. Then there's also Keith Siegel, 65. He's been freed in a separate ceremony in Gaza City. It's the 4th release of hostages since the ceasefire deal between Israel and Hamas began. Apparently, there are orderly scenes in stark contrast to the chaotic handover that we saw on Thursday. Peter will bring you more on that story in his show, which follows this one. Loads of you sending in voice notes as well. Let's hear one from Judy. Good morning, Judy.
Hello, it's Judy from Altofts, West Yorkshire. The problem with the welfare state is that we all know somebody who's never worked a day in their life. And they've poisoned the well for the many of these people. And no government, not Labour or Conservatives, will do anything about it. Because as soon as they start taking sickness benefits off people that they say are fit, the press will go wild and they'll be calling them murderers and this, that and the other. They'll not do it. Plus, Labour loves people being on their books. It's so they can guarantee I'm voting for them. Thank you.
Really good point, Judy. And of course, it's worth saying that our defence budget is 60 billion, our police budget 20 billion, and then you've got the benefit budget 65 billion. Dwarfing the defence budget. Let's take another one from Tristan, again on social welfare. Good morning.
Morning, David. I just want to say, I suffer from anxiety. I get anxious a lot. I also suffer from Crohn's disease. I've also had cancer. I work full time. I pay my bills. I pay my rent. My rent has just gone up again, £200 this year. I'm sorry, but people who say about anxiety and being anxious, yeah, I get anxious. I really do get anxious about a lot of things. But at the end of the day, no one's going to pay my bills. No one's going to pay my rent. I've got to do it myself. So I have to work. You know, I work full time. I'm sorry, I just have no absolute compassion or sympathy for anyone who says those sort of things. Thanks again, David.
Yeah, this was James Mathewson who said that this morning. I think at the end of the day, this is about fairness. Now, I understand people are put on disability benefits. The problem is that some of those people get trapped on there and there is kind of no incentive to go and get any work. There's no re-evaluation. And I think that is what the Labour government is trying to do. They're looking at a number of options, looking at scrapping the work capability assessment, trying to align the system with the assessments for personal independence payments. Those are the PIP payments, and also overhauling the PIP payment scheme as well. It's a huge problem. Multiple governments have failed to get a grip on this. Let's take some more voice notes now. This is Paul talking about taxation.
Good morning, David. For those that are hell-bent on carrying on increasing taxation, they might remember Churchill's famous quote from around 1907 to the Free Trade Association. If you try and tax your way into prosperity, it is like standing in the bucket and trying to lift the bucket up by the handle. Have they learnt nothing?
No. That's the answer. Miles also has sent a voice note about the Labour government.
Morning, David. Great show as always. What's all this nonsense in the Times about lining up Farage to be taken down? Labour should be getting on running the country, doing their job like any new management team in a new business would. They clearly have no clue. Starmer has no vision for the country. They're not interested in the people of this country. They put whatever their priorities are, they're just nothing to do with the rest of us. We'll fight our corner, we'll survive, but they're just showing their hand so obviously. They're clearly terrified, and I guess the people of this country will vote, will speak, and it'll be bye-bye Labour, and I don't think anyone will ever trust this lot again.
It's fascinating, actually, and so what Miles was talking about there, Labour so worried about the rise of Reform that they have a three-pronged strategy to attack Reform UK. I would suggest to the Labour Party they would concentrate on some policies and listening to the electorate. Let's take a call now. Lynn is in sunny Essex. Good morning, Lynn.
Good morning, David.
How are you?
I'm fine. Yourself?
Yeah, good, thanks very much indeed. So much going on this morning. What point would you like to make?
Well, the point I'd like to make is, as regards advisors to the Labour Party, where do these people come from? Because I just don't understand it at times, because they don't talk a lot of common sense. And that chat you had on early this morning, I turned it down because I couldn't be bothered to listen.
Well, I mean, he just didn't want to hear it, did he? He was like, la, 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 la.
Yeah, and I can't understand where they find these people, because they're obviously not the right people to sort of advise what they're supposed to do, and it's just not working.
I mean, for me, it speaks volumes about the ideology of the Labour Party. They're in power. It is clear to me that there was never a plan, and they went into that election saying we have a fully costed plan, we know exactly what we're doing. The minute they get in, it then transpires they hadn't got a plan, and then they're asking people for ideas.
I know, and it's all wrong, because they should have the ideas themselves.
One would think so. Really good to talk to you, Lynn. Thank you very much indeed for your call this morning. Peter Cardwell, resplendent in white.
How are you? Are you saying Labour didn't have a plan? What? The very suggestion.
I think even they would agree.
Well, it's hard to know exactly what they're meant to be doing anyway, especially when they keep saying, let's have a national conversation. No, hold on. You're the government.
No.
You tell us.
It's like, have you got an idea? Any idea? What idea? But also, just in terms of that, I mean, I've been asking this question all morning. What is the problem for the Labour Party? Is the lack of policies? Is it the sort of the characters, or is it Starmer? And if you ditch one, who would it be?
Well, I think it should ditch Richard Hermer, who's the Attorney General, because he keeps saying, oh, things have to be completely legally sound, can't be subject to any form of judicial review. Well, okay, interesting. Also, his backstory is fascinating. You know, he represented Jerry Adams, he represented Shamima Begum, and he has very questionable views in the Middle East as well.
But they're best friends, aren't they?
Yeah, they're BFFs, yeah. BFF. Got rid of Emily Thornberry. I mean, I never thought I'd be saying bring back Emily Thornberry. I think I never thought the day would come.
No, but
when Dame Emily, but today's the day.
Anyway, very quickly, what's coming up?
Well, we're going to talk about a majority of voters backing under 30s migration and a
Brexit
to
Independent
reset. Very, very interesting. Long-term sick people needing to look for jobs and a benefits overhaul. We'll talk about that. Trump's trade war with the EU and Mexico, and Canada as well. We'll talk about navigating family conflicts and political differences, which I find really interesting. We've got a practitioner of constructive conflict who will be on
Well, it's a bit like at a family meal, just don't mention Brexit in the middle of the meal, particularly after wine.
Well, I particularly enjoyed one occasion when someone said to me, all these people who vote for Brexit, they're all stupid and they're all naive and they all don't know anything. And I said, well, would that include the 3 members of my family who voted for Brexit? And the conversation didn't go too well after that.
No,
we'll talk about